Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto has fox ancestor blood inside. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by FOXGOD1243, link in the description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 0. Prologue. It's over, you lost, said a man as he looked at the form of his downed friend lying on the ground. The man who spoke was a tall man with tanned skin and dark eyes. He had waist-length black hair typically styled in a center-parted fringe that framed his face. He often wore the standard shinobi dress of his era, consisting of dark red armor worn over a simple black suit with sandals. This armor was constructed from numerous metal plates, formed into multiple protective guards along his body. Each collar of his shoulder guards bore the Senju clan symbol. He wore a Konoha headband around his forehead and held a wooden spike in a reverse grip in his hand. The man on the ground with the spike aiming towards his stomach just chuckled. Nothing is certain in life except for death. You should know that we both wanted the same thing, only that my point of view is more realistic, he said as he coughed up some blood. He was a fair-skinned man with spiky black hair that had a slight blue tint to it. He let his hair grow to waist length with shoulder-length bangs framing the sides of his face, covering most of his right eye. He has several scars throughout his body. Although still relatively young, more prominent creases had developed under each of his eyes. He wore crimson armor with numerous metal plates, forming protective guards along his chest, waist, shoulders and thighs. He carried on his back an orange-brown gun by which had a long black chain running up it. The first man shook his head. That might very well be. However, I already have my daughter Tsunade to continue my line after I die. You on the other hand, have no one to continue your line, and so, your line ends here with you. You have been a great friend to me and it greatly pains me to kill you. However, you are too dangerous to be left alive, Madara. Please forgive me, he said as he stabbed the wooden spike into his best friend's stomach. Do not apologize to me, Hashirama. Each of us chose his path and this is just the point where our paths cross. It is just unfortunate that we met as enemies and that our beliefs didn't allow us to stay on the same side, the man, now identified as Madara, said as his eyes rolled into the back of his head and he passed out. The other man, Hashirama, looked at the half-dead form of his friend and allowed a few tears to fall down from his eyes. He turned around and started to walk towards where his wife was lying unconscious after sealing the Kyuubi into herself. Time skip. The next morning, at a house not too far away from the place that overnight became known as the Valley of the End, a woman just finished dragging Madara over to said house. Once inside, she placed him on a bed and started to treat his wounds. It was only 3 days later that Madara woke up. With a groan, he sat up, rubbing his head while cursing his friend Hashirama. What he didn't notice was the blonde woman staring at him in shock. How are you already awake? You should be out for at least another week, she asked. Madara turned his gaze to her. And who are you? He asked. The woman scowled. I'm the woman who saved you from bleeding out on the ground. Honestly, you could at least be nice to me, she answered his question with a huff. Madara chuckled lightly. I like you, you have a strong spirit. So where are we? He asked, looking around. The woman shrugged. My home. It's a few hours walk away from where you were impaled on a wooden stick. You should be fully healed in a month if the time it took you to wake up is anything to go by. Time skip. 20 years later, Madara stood over the dead bodies of the same woman who saved his life, the same woman who became his wife a few years ago, and the same woman who gave birth to his child about a year ago. Next to her body were the bodies of 5 bandits, the ones who killed her and gained the wrath of Madara Uchiha for themselves. In his arms was a little boy, his child. He was no older than a year old and had blonde hair, something he took from his mother. Madara intentionally wanted to give the child the last name of his clan, but now, he decided to name him after his mother's family. His name was Menado Namikaze. Time skip. 5 years later, it was 5 years ago that Madara decided to train Menado as hard as he could so that Menado would be able to defend himself and those he cared about. Madara was still angry about his wife's death and is training Menado so that he could leave him at the Leaf Village where he will live, while Madara will be planning and executing his plan to create world peace through fear and war. Madara took a glance at his child and couldn't help but be proud. He was only 6 years old, yet he already had 2 tomos in his Sharingan. However, Madara made sure that Menado would be placing a Genjutsu over his Sharingan automatically so that no one would question him and discover that Madara was in fact alive. Bad, Menado said, drawing Madara's attention to him. Yes, son. What is it? He asked. I know that I have to leave now since you have explained to me why I can't come with you. However, before I go, I would like you to know that I will always love you as my dad. Menado said, hugging Madara's leg. Madara allowed a rare smile to appear on his face as he placed his hand on his son's head. That's good. Now you need to go. Madara said as he turned his head to look at the massive gates of Konoha. Don't forget, you cannot go to the Uchiha clan, since they are too prideful and power-hungry for their own good. Simply go to the Hokage and tell him that you are an orphan and that your parents died from a bandit attack. Never forget, your mother and I love you a lot, so make us proud." Madara finished and turned around as Menado started to make his way to the huge gates of Konohagakure. "I'm Skip. 15 years later. I swear that I'm gonna kill you after this, Menado. It's your fault for knocking me up," shouted a woman as she pushed, trying to give birth to a child. The pale form of her husband had his hand on her stomach, desperately trying to hold the Kyuubi seal from breaking. The red-haired woman screamed one last time with the last push, and the baby was out into the waiting blanket that the nurse had prepared for him. Menado sighed in relief as he smiled at his wife. "Kushina-chan, how are you feeling?" he asked. His wife groaned. "Better than before, though I'm still gonna hurt you once I recover," she said as a sadistic grin came onto her face. Menado paled as he was reminded yet again that his wife was going to hurt him. The nurse came over with the child and gave him to Kushina. "Congratulations, Kushina, Menado, it's a healthy baby boy," she said. Kushina hugged her child, caressing his cheeks. She took a few minutes to finally give him back to the nurse so she could do a checkup on him along with his first bath. However, as the nurse walked away with the child, Menado and Kushin heard 3 thuds. They turned around to see that both of their Anbu guards, along with the nurse, who happened to be the wife of the 3rd Hokage, were dead on the floor. They saw a masked man standing over them and their baby boy in the man's arms. "4th Hokage, step away from the Jinchuriki," he said calmly. Menado glared at him. "Who the hell are you?" he asked. "I'm Madara Che," the masked man said as he threw the baby into the air. Menado quickly threw a kunai towards the baby and teleported to it, catching his baby. However, as he caught him, he noticed a few explosive tags stuck onto the blanket. Menado teleported out of the cave which his wife gave birth in and out into the open, where he threw the blanket away, before teleporting to a safe house outside of Konoha, where he placed Naruto in a bed. Menado quickly teleported to Kushina, just in time too, as she was almost killed by the giant claw of the Kyuubi. He couldn't understand why the Kyuubi would do such a thing as he and Kushina were great friends with the Kyuubi. It was then that he noticed her eyes. They were in the shape of the Sharingan, and he realized that she was under control. Menado teleported to his safe house where he placed Kushina on the bed next to his baby boy. Menado placed his cloak on his back and took one of his kunes out. In a flash of yellow light, Menado disappeared. Menado reappeared outside only to dodge a hand that tried to grab him. He jumped back, creating some distance between himself and the man who pretended to be his father. "You aren't Madara. Your chakra signature is not even similar to his own. The only thing you have in common is that you are both Uchihas," Menado said calmly. The man tilted his head to the side. "And how would you know Madara's chakra signature?" he asked, though Menado never answered. Menado simply appeared in front of him and shoved a blue ball of spiraling energy into the man's face. However, Menado simply passed through him. The man laughed as Menado looked at him in shock. "Well, it was fun. However, I will end it now," he said and dashed towards Menado. The blonde in question threw one of his kunai at the man's head as he too dashed towards him. "Now you lost, 4th Hokage," the man said as his hand almost touched Menado and Menado's kunai passed through the man's head. Menado smirked as he suddenly disappeared in a flash and appeared above the man, shoving the same blue ball of energy into his back. The man screamed in pain as he leveled a glare at Menado through his mask. "Next time I will kill you," he said before disappearing into a swirl of space. Menado sighed in relief as he teleported to the top of the Hokage mountain. He was just in time too, as the Kyuubi had fired a Bijuu bomb at the same mountain. Menado teleported the bomb away using his flying Raijin before teleporting to the battlefield where everyone was fighting the Kyuubi. He bit his thumb and ran through a few hand seals. "Summoning jutsu," he shouted as in a huge puff of smoke, the toad boss Gamabunta appeared on top of the Kyuubi. "Hold her off for a few seconds, Bunta. I need to gather up the chakra to teleport her away from the village," Menado shouted to the toad boss. "I will do my best. However, I think you'd better gather up your chakra quickly," the toad boss shouted as he blocked a claw swipe with his sword. Menado closed his eyes for a few seconds and suddenly, orange markings appeared around his eyes. He teleported to Gamabunta, though he was slightly slower. Once he was there, Gamabunta dispelled and Menado teleported away with the Kyuubi. Menado used all of the natural energy that he gathered for his Sage mode in order to teleport Kyuubi away. They appeared at some clearing where Kyuubi couldn't destroy anything. Menado disappeared again, only to appear in front of the Kyuubi with his wife, child and a baby bed for his child. He placed his son on the bed before turning to his wife. "I need you to use your chains to hold her while I release her from the Jinjutsu and seal her into our little Naruto. I know the risks, however, he will need to be as strong as possible for when that masked man comes back." That will also allow Naruto to have a friend in Kurama, as you will die from the extraction and I will die from the Reaper Death Seal," Menado said sadly. Kushina slowly nodded her head. Chains came out of her back and wrapped around the Kyuubi. Meanwhile, Menado was riding a seal on Naruto's stomach. Once he was done, Menado turned to look at the Kyuubi, his eyes blazing in his Mangekyo Sharingan. A trail of blood went across his cheeks as he reversed the Genjutsu on Kyuubi. The beast blinked her eyes a few times before looking at Menado and Kushina with a sad expression on her face. "I'm sorry. Please, quickly seal me again. I do not wish to cause any more destruction," she said. Menado nodded as he started running through a very long set of hand seals. "Kurama-chan," Kushina called, drawing the attention of the beast. "I am too weak at the moment, so I will not make it through this night. We will be sealing you into our baby, Naruto. Please, he has a hard life before him, be his friend. Please teach him how to be a strong shinobi and just be there for him when other people reject him," Kushina said sadly. The Kyuubi, known also by the name Kurama, nodded her head. "I will. I'm honored that you entrusted your child to me. I will do everything in my power to make sure he becomes a great shinobi and an even greater person," she said as the silhouette of the Shinigami appeared behind Menado. Kushina smiled before she fell face first onto the ground, already dead. Menado sadly looked at the form of his wife. He looked back to the Kyuubi and sealed the whole thing into Naruto, closing the seal, but not before placing his own chakra into the seal as well. After all, he needed to tell Naruto about his heritage. That was it for Menado, as well as his soul left his body with the Shinigami. He fell face first onto the ground, leaving only the crying form of Naruto on the bed with a note next to him. "This child is Naruto Uzumaki. Please keep his heritage as my son a secret, as it would give him my enemies to deal with. He is also the new Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, so try and help him as much as you can. Thanks, Menado Namikaze." That was what was written on the note. That was also the way that Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage, found them all. Time skip. 5 years later, here he is. "Let's go capture the demon and finish what the fourth started," a villager yelled as he chased after a small blonde kid. That kid was the same kid that came out of Kushina and the same kid which Menado sealed the Kyuubi into. He had spiky blonde hair and deep blue eyes. One each of his cheeks, he had 3 whisker-like marks. His form was malnourished as he was starving and doing quite a bit of running every day. He wore a white shirt with a red swirl symbol of the Uzumaki clan on his back. He had blue short pants and torn red shoes. The kid, Naruto as Menado introduced him, was running as fast as he could in order to get away from the mob of angry villagers that were chasing after him. As he turned his head to look behind him to check if they were still after him, he noticed a few shinobi among the crowd. Before he could do anything, a few kunai were tossed at him from the crowd. Suddenly, Naruto's vision became clear and it was as if time slowed, almost coming to a halt. He grabbed one of the kunai out of the air and used it to deflect the other kunai. It was easy for him because they were moving in slow motion for him. He saw a fence in front of him. He prepared to jump over it, but before he could, one of the shinobi caught up to him. Naruto closed his eyes as the shinobi slashed at his face, cutting him from the middle of his forehead, down over his left eye, and down to around the height of his nose in a straight cut. Naruto cried out in pain as he jumped over the fence, subconsciously channeling chakra to his legs and making it over the fence. The mob climbed over the fence, but Naruto was already gone. As Naruto ran, holding the left side of his face where he was cut, he started remembering what happened in the last few times that he was caught by those same villagers. The memory of being stabbed through his wrists and ankles, those same kunai went through his wrists and ankles and into a wall behind him, pinning him there, while the shinobi among the crowd used him as a target for shuriken and kunai throwing. Another memory of being tied to a wooden log which was in the middle of a large fire. He remembered the feeling of being burned alive. Other than that, he remembered a few more scenarios where he was brutally tortured. The two things that were in all of those memories other than pain and suffering was that the villagers started it and that his grandfather figure, his Hokage Ajaisen, saved him from death in all of them. That was his last conscious thought as his vision turned black and white and he fainted. Naruto woke up in a sewer, wondering where he was. He knew it wasn't Konoha's sewer as he was thrown down there a couple of times and that left him wondering just where exactly he was. "Follow my voice," a soft male voice said from one of the tunnels of the sewer. Naruto carefully walked down that hall and once he reached the end of it, he walked into a huge sewer room with massive vertical bars. However, what caught his attention was the man standing before the bars. He couldn't ever forget that man as he was Naruto's idol. "Fourth Hokage?" Naruto hesitantly asked. The man in question smiled at him as Naruto walked closer and closer to him. Menado frowned as he saw just how young Naruto was. That, along with the fact that the left side of his face was slashed open, was enough to anger Menado. "Yes, Naruto, it's me. My name is Menado Namikaze and I was the fourth Hokage. I'm going to need you to listen to me very carefully for the next few minutes, okay?" Menado asked as he realized that he had no time to waste. Naruto slowly nodded. Good. The first thing I would like to tell you is that I am your father. He said and watched as Naruto stared at him with his mouth open. Why, you're my dad? Really? Naruto asked as tears gathered up in his eyes. Menado nodded his head. Yeah, I am. However, we don't have too much time left before my chakra runs out. I unfortunately am dead at the moment and have left a little bit of my chakra in you so that I will be able to tell you about your heritage since no one but your mother and I knew just how truly special you are. He said. He didn't expect Naruto to jump on him in a hug. However, he just hugged his son back. You are saying that I have some awesome ancestors? Naruto asked excitedly. Well, other than you, that is, he added. Menado chuckled. Yeah, I guess you could say something like that. Tell me, Naruto, do you know who Madara Uchiha is? He asked. Naruto nodded his head. Yeah, I think he was the leader of the Uchiha clan and one of the founders of Konoha, along with Hashirama Senju, the first Hokage. Naruto answered in as much detail as he could, doing his best to impress his father. That worked as Menado was actually quite impressed with his 5-year-old son's knowledge. Good, you actually are quite smart. Menado said with a smile, watching as his son squealed in excitement and happiness. Naruto, please listen to me. You should know that Madara was actually my father, meaning that he was your grandfather. He said and Naruto froze. A second later, Naruto was jumping around the Sower in excitement. Yay, with ancestors like you and Madara Uchiha, there's no way I'm not becoming Hokage. He shouted. Menado laughed at Naruto's excitement before grabbing his shoulders. I'm gonna need you to be focused for these last few things I have to say, alright? He asked. Naruto's face became serious as he nodded. Menado smiled. Good. Now what do you know about the Uchiha clan's bloodline? He asked. Naruto thought for a second before he remembered. I think I read about it once. It's a dijutsu called the Sharingan. He said, scratching his chin in thought. Menado smiled and nodded again. Correct. Now you should know that the Sharingan has 3 levels. Each level increases the number of tomos in the eyes. The more tomos the eye has, the sharper it is and the better the sight is. If you look down at your reflection in the water, you will be able to see that you have unlocked the first stage of the Sharingan with 1 tomo in each eye. He finished. Naruto looked down at the water of the Sower and had to hold himself back from jumping around in joy again. His face twisted into a massive grin as he turned back to his father. Good, now let's continue. Do you know the woman who went by the title of the Red Death of Konoha? Menado asked, curious to see what Naruto knew about his own mother. Naruto nodded his head enthusiastically. Of course I do. She was the one to hold the record for ramen eating at the Ichiraku's ramen shop. That is before I beat her record after I saw that she was actually a kunoichi. I did a lot of research about her, since anyone who can eat that much ramen is an amazing person in my book. Naruto said, grinning. Menado was shocked. You want to tell me that you beat Kushina-chan's record of eating 57 bowls of ramen in one sitting? He asked in disbelief. Naruto grinned. Yap. It was hard and I only managed to eat 58 bowls, but I won. He said with a massive proud grin. Menado chuckled nervously. Well, that woman, Kushina Uzumaki, was my wife and your mother. He said, watching Naruto go from shock to amazement before settling with stars in his eyes. Really, my mom is awesome. He said. Menado laughed. You just wait until you hear about her family, he said. Naruto tilted his head to the side. Who were they? He asked in curiosity. Menado grinned. Well, her mother is one of the legendary Sannin, Tsunade Senju. If we're already speaking about Sannin, you should know that your godfather is also one of them, being Jiraiya, the Toad Sage. Naruto was just about ready to explode right now. He just learned that not only was he not a clanless orphan, he was actually a member of all 3 of the strongest clans in the world. His mother was at least part Uzumaki, his grandfather was the strongest Uchiha to ever live, and his grandmother was one of the legendary Sannin, as well as a very powerful member of the Senju clan. Menado cleared his throat. Stay with me, Naruto, we have 2 last things to talk about. First is your mother's grandparents. They were Hashirama Senju and Mito Uzumaki. Also, her granduncle was Tobirama Senju. He said, and that was it for Naruto. He started jumping around in the Sower, shouting some things about amazing old men. Menado noticed that his hands were starting to disappear and knew he had to finish the last subject. Naruto. I don't have a lot of time. Please listen to me. I have one last thing to say. He called. Naruto instantly appeared in front of him. Good. You must be wondering where we are, right? He asked and Naruto nodded. We are inside of your mind. This is also where something else is. Do you know about the Kyuubi attack that happened 5 years ago? He asked. Naruto nodded. Good. Well, let's say that the Kyuubi is actually immortal, meaning that I couldn't have killed it. Because I knew that, I had to do the next best thing, I had to seal her into someone. The only one which I could trust with the Kyuubi's power was my own son, and so, I have sealed her into you. Kurama, please step forward. He called out. Naruto seemed to have reached a realization. So that's why they hate me? Because they think I'm Kyuubi? He asked rhetorically. Naruto smiled to himself. Alright, now that I know, I can finally do something about it. I'll prove to them that Kyuubi isn't as bad as they think, and if it is, I will simply show them that I'm not the Kyuubi, he said, happy. Menado smiled, seeing that his son didn't hold a grudge against anyone. Just then, the giant form of the Kyuubi stepped into the light. Greetings Naruto, I have wanted to see you for a while now. I'm glad we could finally meet. I have grown tired of simply healing you up while you got hurt, she commented offhandedly in a soft feminine voice. Naruto ran into the cage and hugged her paw. Were you healing me all this time? Thank you very much. He said. Kyuubi smiled at him. No problem, I owe you that much for forgiving me so quickly. She commented. Menado walked into the cage and stood next to Naruto. Naruto, before I run out of chakra, let me tell you what happened on the day you were born. He said and went on to explain what happened when Kyuubi attacked and how she was controlled. Once he was done, Naruto understood everything. Thanks for telling me Dad, I will be sure to clear Kyuubi's name, he said. He looked up at the same nine-tailed beast. Kyuubi, could you leave the scar on my face? I mean, heal my face, but leave the scar. I would like for it to be a reminder of the day I made the promise to clear your name. Besides, it would give me an advantage if my opponent would underestimate me because they thought I could only use one eye. He explained. Kyuubi slowly nodded. I can do that. However, once a few weeks will pass, it would be impossible to heal, she said. Naruto grinned up at her. Good, because I don't think I'll be able to clear your name in just a few weeks. He said. She was genuinely surprised by his words. She smiled down at the form of the small child. Alright, I'll leave the scar there. And call me Kurama, she said with a big smile. Naruto nodded. Alright, thanks Kurama. He said. Menado cleared his throat, drawing Naruto's attention. Alright Naruto, my chakra will be running out any second now. Just remember that Kurama is here to teach you how to be a strong and good shinobi, as well as make you a good person and be your friend. Please just promise me that you will not go to the Uchiha clan as a family. They will simply use you as a weapon. Menado said, and after seeing Naruto nodding, he ran through a few hand seals before clapping his hands. Seal release. He said as the gates of the cage swung open. Just as the gate opened, freeing Kurama, Menado disappeared into nothingness. Naruto clenched his fist and held it up. I promise Mom, Dad, I'll make you and everyone else in the family proud. He said as he sat down with Kurama, planning his new training program. Time skip. The next day, it was early evening and Naruto and Hiruzen were walking through the market part of Konoha. Naruto was just done explaining to Hiruzen about everything his father told him. From Madara and Hashirama to the Kyuubi and her controlled attack 5 years ago. Now, after Naruto told Hiruzen about his new goal in life and Naruto's new desire to get strong, they were going to buy Naruto some training gear. Naruto walked into a shop only for the shopkeeper to start walking angrily towards him, probably going to kick him out. Just then, Hiruzen placed his hand on Naruto's shoulder. Seeing that, the shopkeeper went right past them, as if he didn't even see them. Naruto grinned. With Aji-san here, they can't do anything to me, he thought. Naruto went over to the shinobi side of the store and started putting kunai, shuriken and senbon into some bag that he had gotten to carry it all. Once they were done, Naruto paid for all 300 kunai, 300 shuriken and 500 senbon before they went to the next store. They went into a shinobi store where Naruto bought himself some shinobi clothing that had a fitting seal on them, meaning that they will grow along with him. In the same store, he bought 50 empty scrolls, 300 empty tags, 150 brushes and a shitload of ink. Their last stop was at the weapons store. There, Naruto bought himself a bokken to train with, as well as a 28-inch katana. It had a white hilt, a golden handguard and a metallic black blade. Its sheath was also pure white. Once they were done, they went to drop everything at Naruto's apartment before going together to the Hokage office. Time skip. 5 years later, it was Naruto's 10th birthday and honestly, even though he didn't know it quite yet, it was the most important day of his life. Over the last 5 years, Naruto has taken to walking around with his left eye closed, giving people the illusion that he couldn't use that eye. Along with that, Naruto had gotten to around a high Jonin level of skill. His taijutsu was at Jonin level because of the fact that he was still growing and that his body wasn't fully mature yet. The same couldn't be said about his ninjutsu though. In ninjutsu, he could only be classified as a monster. Naturally, having affinities for all 5 chakra natures and having chakra levels that could rival the Ichibi himself made him into someone who defeating in a ninjutsu battle was next to impossible. However, unlike his ninjutsu that was unmatched and his taijutsu that was rather good, his jinjutsu was shit. He couldn't cast a jinjutsu to save his life. Without his Sharingan that is using his Sharingan he could use some jinjutsu, but without it, he was helpless in jinjutsu since his chakra reserves were so big. In Fuinjutsu, much like in ninjutsu, Naruto was unmatched. Being one of the last members of the Uzumaki clan and having Fuinjutsu literally in his blood made it rather easy for him to learn the art. He was already a level 20 seal master, making him the highest level possible. Though to anyone without Uzumaki blood it was impossible to go over level 15. The Kinjutsu, he was rather good. He was slightly better with Kinjutsu than in Taijutsu, but that was simply because of the fact that his body was still growing and his sword wasn't. While he still couldn't hope to match the level of one of the 7 ninja swordsmen, let alone Kushina, he was on the right path there. Finally, his Taijutsu, the Sharingan, has already fully matured to a 3-tomo Sharingan 4 years ago, making him the youngest Uchiha to ever mature his Sharingan. Normally, this amount of progress in only 5 years would be impossible, but thanks to one of the jutsu that Kurama taught him, he was able to do so. That jutsu was the Shadow Clone Jutsu. It allows the user to create solid clones that transfer their memory to the original every time they are dispelled. Meaning that Naruto could send clones to train and at the end of the day, he would receive all of their experience. That was what was happening right now actually. Kurama just suggested that Naruto try to combine 2 chakra elements to create a new one. More specifically, she suggested that he try combining the earth and water elements to create his great-grandfather's wood release. Naruto slammed his leg on the ground, channeling both earth and water nature chakra into his leg. In front of him, a small flower sprouted out of the ground, making Naruto gape in shock. It seems I was right, you do possess the wood release. Congratulations, you have unlocked another bloodline. Kurama cheerfully said in his head. Naruto grinned. Thanks Kurama-chan. It seems like you were right again. He said to her in his head, making her smile though an anime-style blush was present on her huge fox face. Just then, Naruto sensed 3 people approaching the training grounds. He quickly burned the small flower with a small fire-style jutsu, completely burning it and leaving nothing to be seen. Just then, 2 people walked into the training grounds. Those 2 were Kakashi Haddock and Hiruzen Sarutobi. However, Naruto knew that those 2 weren't his Aji-san and his hero Anayasan, since their chakra signature was different from the 2 original ones. That was another thing that happened in the past 5 years. Flashback, after Naruto and Hiruzen were done with their shopping, they went back to Hiruzen's office. Dog Hiruzen called and an Anbu with a dog mask appeared in front of the child in the aged cage. He kneeled before the Hokage, waiting for orders. Remove your mask, Kakashi. From today until I tell you otherwise, I want you to train Naruto-kun. He already knows about his father, so you should be able to talk with him about your old days, who knows, it might just get you out of your depression. He said with a smile. Kakashi removed the mask and turned to Naruto. He stood up and smiled. I'm glad to be the one to train you kid. After all, your dad taught me everything I know. He said with his famous eye smile while ruffling the kid's hair. Naruto looked up at Kakashi in surprise. Really? My dad was your sensei? He asked in excitement. Maybe this man would be able to tell him something about his father. Naruto was sure that this man, Kakashi as the Hokage called him, had some awesome stories about his dad. Kakashi nodded. Yeah. He was a great sensei. He said with a smile. Naruto started jumping up and down before the Hokage remembered something. Kakashi, there is also something I want you to help Naruto-kun with. Menado never told this to you, but he was the son of Madara Uchiha, meaning he had the Sharingan, and now Naruto-kun has it too. I would like for you to teach Naruto-kun how to use it properly. Hiruzen said, much to the surprise of Kakashi. The silver-haired man looked at Naruto only to see his eyes in the form of the 1-tomo Sharingan. Kakashi smiled and nodded to the Hokage. I'll be happy to teach him. End of flashback. Naruto narrowed his one open eye at the 2. He could easily see that they were using the transformation jutsu. He decided to act as if he didn't know that they were imposters. Hey. Aji-san. Hiro Anayasan. He shouted as he ran over to them. Kakashi I smiled at him, but it was totally wrong. Naruto, how about you come with us for a second? He said. Naruto sweat dropped and grabbed the hilt of the sword that was strapped onto his left thigh. I can't take it anymore. You two are so bad. Hiro Anayasan always calls me Nai-chan, and the way you smiled with your eye, it was all wrong. He shouted as his Sharingan activated with the same eye using a Jinjutsu to hide herself. Just as Naruto made to slash at the 2, the third person appeared next to him and slashed at his throat with a kunai, going to decapitate him. Naruto couldn't believe it. He was going to die because he assumed that the third one would not engage. His Sharingan could be counted as a curse right now as it showed him his death in slow motion. He knew that even Kurama couldn't heal him if his head was cut off. He decided to make sure that at least his best friend would know what he kept hidden from her for such a long time now. Kurama-chan, this is the end for me. I cannot block the kunai. Before I die, I would like you to know that in the last few years, you were my best friend and I have started to love you. Even though I still don't understand the whole concept of love, I know it means that I will forever be by your side and that's something that I wish could happen. I don't really care that you are not a human, I would simply like you to know before I die that I think I love you. He finished talking in his head. He didn't know what love was since no one ever told him. Other than that, he never had the talk as he was only 10 years old. However, from the romance books that his clones read when they read the entire library of Konoha, he knew that people who love each other are always there for each other, and that was what he wanted with Kurama. Had he actually gone into the mindscape, he could have seen that there was no fox in there. There was simply a woman crying. She never expected Naruto to love her, and subconsciously, she has grown to love him as well. The fact that he said that to her as he was about to die left her crying. However, just as a tear dropped out of Naruto's eyes in the real world and the kunai was about to make contact with his neck, both of Naruto's eyes shot wide open and his Sharingan revealed with no Genjutsu hiding it, spinning very fast. The kunai went through Naruto's neck just as the Sharingan stopped spinning and it settled in the form of the Uzumaki clan swirl in black, along with the outside in red. The kunai passed through Naruto's neck in a clean cut, but nothing happened. It was as if Naruto's neck was not really there, as if he was a ghost. Naruto didn't question this and slammed his leg on the ground, channeling a little bit of Kyuubi's chakra into the earth and water chakra that he sent into the ground. That resulted in both of the transformed enemies being impaled on large wooden spikes, killing them instantly. Naruto turned to the last person, the one that almost killed him. He glared at him, his newly awakened Mangekyo Sharingan glowing with power. Naruto slowly walked towards the man drawing his sword at the same time. Just before Naruto could kill him as well, his hand was grabbed by the real Kakashi. Naruto looked at him and once he saw his brother figure, he calmed down. His Sharingan deactivated as he fell to his knees. Naruto placed his sword back inside of its sheath before he started to cry. I killed them, I really killed someone, they tried to kill me first, but I killed them myself, he said. That was all Kakashi needed to know to understand what was going on. Again, on Naruto's birthday, people tried to kill him. Usually, they never got even close to doing so, but apparently, this time, they were able to get close enough for Naruto to feel threatened. He figured that as he saw Naruto's Mangekyo Sharingan. That would only activate in life or death situations. Looking around, he saw the two impaled in two wooden spikes. Kakashi's eyes widened in realization. Not only did Naruto awaken his Mangekyo from this, he also awakened his great-grandfather's bloodline, the wood release. Just then, he noticed that Naruto had fainted and that the guy that tried to kill him was getting away. Kakashi appeared next to the man and knocked him out before getting back to Naruto. Kakashi pulled both dead bodies out of the wooden spikes before burning them, leaving no evidence that Naruto had awakened his bloodline. He sealed both dead men into a scroll before picking Naruto and the unconscious man up and using the body flicker jutsu to get to the Hokage's tower where they would wait for Naruto to wake up so he could tell them what happened. Meanwhile, inside of Naruto's mind, when he fainted, Naruto went into his mindscape, totally forgetting what he said to his best friend and just wanting to have someone with him as he tried to deal with the fact that he had just killed someone for the first time. As he entered his mindscape, he noticed the beautiful grassy fields that he had created for Kurama. However, what he couldn't see was the person that he was looking for. Just then, he saw the form of a woman a little further away from him. She had knee-length blood-red hair with red eyes that has a vertical slit in the middle of them. She stood at the height of 5'8" and had fair skin. She looked to be around 17 years of age. Her face was heart-shaped and it was equipped with a small button nose and full lips. Her bust size was around an E-cup. Her wide and rather busty chest became thinner at the waist and then flared out into a massive ass. Down from her rather fat ass, her legs went down to thick thighs and long legs. All in all, she was perfect and had the perfect version of an Hercules figure. She wore a red top that strained against her rather large bust and revealed her stomach. That top also had a small V-cut, showing a little bit of her cleavage. She also had a skirt that reached down to just a little below her middle thighs and was barefoot. As Naruto ignored the woman for now and started searching for his friend, the woman caught sight of Naruto. With tears in her eyes, she ran over to him. He didn't notice him approaching until she had her hands wrapped around him and his face pressed into her bust. Naruto could hear her crying. He pulled his head from her breasts and looked at her face rather curiously. Is something wrong? He asked her, hiding his own desire to simply cuddle up on top of his friend's head and cry in her fur. She looked at Naruto for a second before something clicked in her mind. Suddenly, her ears disappeared and instead, 2 fox ears appeared out of her head and at the same time, 9 fox tails appeared out of her backbone. He finally realized what she was. Kurama-chan? He asked in surprise, his voice cracking and tears gathering in his eyes. Kurama grabbed his face and kissed him on the lips. I love you too, Naruto-kun. I thought you were going to die, I thought that I lost you. She was cut off as Naruto kissed her again. Tears began falling out of their eyes as they each let out their sorrow in each other's arms. Naruto has created a comfortable bed where they could cuddle together and cry. They simply held each other for a few hours, just enjoying the other's presence and the fact that they have finally confessed their feelings to each other. Finally, Naruto broke their silence. Kurama-chan. He asked softly as he felt her soft hands running through his hair as his head rested on her chest between her large breasts. He heard her humming softly in response. "How do I get you out into the real world?" he asked, surprising the fox lady that was laying in bed with him. "What? Why would you want to do that?" she asked in surprise. Naruto scratched his chin. "Well, you are my best friend and now I guess mate, so I want you to be out with me. I think it's the least I can do for you after everything you've done for me," he said with a small smile. Kurama wrapped her arms around him. She lifted his head upwards and kissed him on the lips. "Thank you, Naruto-kun, but there's no way for me to be out and you to stay alive, and that's something that I can't have happening," she said sadly. Naruto thought for a second. "If you get out, I die because my body has gotten used to you as a power source, right?" he asked. "Yes. My demonic chakra is flowing through your normal one, and so, if I am extracted, your chakra will have no demonic chakra to feed on, resulting in your death," she answered. Naruto grinned as he turned around and sat up. Kurama sat up, looking at him. "I have an idea. How about you push all 9 tails of your chakra into my coils? That will result in an overflow of the coil which will probably force my body to create another one where it'll store your chakra and start creating demonic chakra of its own. That way, you can get out and regain the chakra which you have given me, while I will have your power inside of me as well. It should work because my body is already immune to your chakra as I was exposed to it since birth." Naruto finished his plan. Kurama thought about it for a few minutes, thinking if it could work. Finally, she nodded. "That would work. However, there will be one side effect. You will be transformed into what is known as a Hanyu or a hybrid between a demon and a human. Demon fox in our case. That means that you will have fox ears and tails just like me. Though, like me, you will be able to make those features disappear," she said before another thing came to her mind. "That actually might work very well. Because you already have more chakra than a chibi does, you will most likely have 10 fox tails, making you the single most powerful being on the planet. In terms of raw chakra that is. As of now, even if you have 20 tails you won't beat me in a human form battle, since your skills are only at the level of a jonin," she said teasingly, getting a pout out of Naruto much to her amusement. "However, I will make sure that by the time you are 16 and become a genin, you will be the strongest being to currently exist," she finished. Naruto grinned and kissed her again. "Thank you, Kurama-chan. I love you so much," he said lovingly. She just smiled at him. "Once I wake up, I'll explain what happened to Aji-san and Iro-Niasen, and then I'll go play some chakra suppression seals in my house where we'll release you," he explained and she nodded, giggling at his disrespectful nicknames for both the Hokage and his other sensei big brother. Outside, at the Hokage's office, Naruto's eyes slowly opened. He sat up on the couch that he was sitting next to. Looking around, he could see Hiruzen doing his paperwork and Kakashi sitting on a chair in front of Hiruzen's desk, reading his porn. Naruto groaned, drawing their attention to him. "Aji-san, for how much time have I been asleep?" he asked. "Around 2 hours," answered the old man and Naruto nodded. The age cage gained a more serious expression onto his face. "How are you feeling, Naruto-kun? The first kill usually is the hardest one, and sometimes it ends shinobi's careers before they even started," he explained. Naruto just smiled. "I'm feeling good. Actually, I'm feeling great. I should actually thank those guys," he said with a grin. Hiruzen raised his eyebrow. "What do you mean?" he asked. Kakashi smiled with his eye as he knew what was coming. "I assume that Iro-Niasen didn't tell you what he saw, right?" he asked and Kakashi nodded, not the least bit bothered by his little brother's nickname for him. "I didn't tell him anything as I can't be sure. We decided to wait until you woke up," he said. Naruto nodded and smiled at Hiruzen before activating his Sharingan. He could sense that the normal Anbu were already gone, so he had no problem showing his Sharingan. His Sharingan started to spin and a few seconds later, they stopped with his new Mangekyo glowing. Hiruzen nodded, slightly surprised by the age at which Naruto had unlocked his Mangekyo, but not too surprised otherwise. "That's the Mangekyo Sharingan. While it could be a strong tool, it also blinds the user as you use it, so do so wisely," Hiruzen said, much to Naruto's surprise. "Naruto-kun. Tell him that it doesn't apply to you since you also have Senju blood in you. Explain to him how it all started with the sage and that he didn't go blind because he had both Uchiha and Senju blood," Kurama said in his head. Naruto smiled. "Thank you, Kurama," he thought to her as he refocused on the Hokage. "Kurama-chan says that it won't happen to me. She says that the Sage of Six Paths also had the Mangekyo Sharingan and he didn't go blind because he had both Uchiha and Senju blood in him," Naruto explained and Hiruzen was shocked. To be able to use the Mangekyo without any drawback except for the normal use of chakra is incredible. "That's not all that happened. You should know that other than activating my Mangekyo and getting my first kill over with, I also unlocked another bloodline. I actually unlocked it a few seconds before my attackers came. I was able to combine water and earth chakra and create a small flower. After I unlocked my Mangekyo, I subconsciously channeled Kurama-chan's chakra into my water and earth chakra and created the wooden spikes that killed those two men. He finished and Hiruzen was shocked. You want to tell me that you are capable of combining the water and earth elements and create the wood element? He asked in shock. Naruto grinned and nodded his head before he pressed his hand to Hiruzen's table. They all watched as a small flower started growing out of the wooden table. This is incredible. I have no doubt that one day you will become our strongest shinobi. Hiruzen said as he smiled at his surrogate grandson. Thanks Aji-san. Though that wasn't all that they had caused, there is one more thing, but you will only hear about it in a few days, when I will be able to be certain about my ability to do so. He said cryptically before he started walking towards the door. Naruto suddenly turned around and looked at Hiruzen. Oh yeah, Aji-san, I forgot to ask you. Can you give me the scrolls for my dad's Rasengan and Flying Raijin? I want to be able to work on those two as a side project, maybe not the Rasengan, but the Flying Raijin will probably take me some time to master. He said. Hiruzen smacked his forehead. Yes, I forgot. There is a vault behind Menado's picture. The Jutsu scrolls are in there. There is a blood seal that makes sure that you will be the only one capable of opening it. He explained. Naruto walked over to Menado's picture and took it off the wall. He saw the seal on the vault and bit down on his thumb. He quickly pressed the wound on the seal as it started to heal. A few drops of blood were wiped onto the seal before Naruto's wound completely healed. The vault opened to show two scrolls. Naruto opened each of them and saw that one was labeled Rasengan and one was labeled Flying Raijin. He sealed them into a seal that he had on his wrist before waving to the two older men in the room and leaving through the door. Naruto ran through the village, wanting to get home as soon as possible. The outside of his house might look bad, but ever since he placed security seals around his apartment, he was able to keep it nice and clean. He made it into his apartment and locked the door, activating the security seals. He pulled out a few tags from a drawer and started drawing seals on them. He placed them all around his house, making sure that no one was going to sense the massive burst of Kyuubi's chakra that was going to be happening right now. Kurama-chan, there is just one more thing that I want to ask of you before we begin, he told his best friend and lover. And what would that be? She asked in his head. Naruto grinned. On your way out, I want you to take half of my own chakra. Take just enough for it to make its own coil. I want you to do that because I want you to become a shinobi and go on missions with me. If you will only use your own chakra as a shinobi, you will be easily recognized as the Kyuubi. He explained. Kurama smiled as her eyes started to tear up. Thank you, Naruto-kun. I will happily go after you everywhere you go. She said as Naruto laid on his bed. That was the only thing he liked about his apartment. He had bought himself a queen-size bed after placing the security seals. I'm going to start in a few seconds, so please, prepare yourself. This is going to be rather painful, so please bear with me. She said, and after feeling Naruto nodding, she pushed all 9 tails of her chakra into Naruto's chakra coils, forcing them to expand and duplicate. Leaving his normal chakra in one of the coils and every other tail of chakra that he got from Kurama had made a coil for itself. Kurama grabbed herself half a tail's worth of Naruto's own chakra and placed it in one of her own coils, leaving her with 8 empty coils for her to fill up with her demonic chakra and 1/2 full coil with Naruto's own normal chakra. Naruto couldn't be happier that he had placed silencing seals around his apartment since all he did for the next few hours was scream. He couldn't imagine how painful it would be to have foreign chakra create 9 new chakra coils inside of his body. Thankfully, a few hours later, the chakra had settled inside of his body and Kurama felt that it was safe for her to leave his body, taking half of his normal chakra in the process. She left his body and after seeing her outside of the seal, Naruto smiled and allowed himself to pass out. Kurama herself was feeling rather exhausted and she knew that she would feel that way for the next month or so until her body would be able to recover the chakra that she gave to Naruto. She got in bed with Naruto after removing her top and skirt, leaving her in only her bra and panties. She laid her head on his small chest before smiling and falling asleep. She was finally free and with the person she loved. Chapter 1. The strongest genin in history. Naruto groaned as a ray of sunlight hit his eyes in his sleep. He tried to shift his weight and turn in order to get the light out of his eyes, but he couldn't. He felt something wrapped around him and a rather heavy weight on his chest. Naruto opened his eyes, trying to see what was going on around him, and couldn't help the massive smile that crept onto his face when he saw the form of his best friend and lover almost glowing in the sunlight. He leaned down and kissed her forehead, remembering from the romance books that women look to be woken up with kisses. Kurama slowly opened her eyes and smiled weakly at Naruto. "Good morning, Naruto-kun," she said in a weak voice. Naruto looked at her in concern. "Are you feeling alright?" he asked. She smiled at him. "Yeah, I'm fine. It's just that I'm gonna be exhausted for the next day until my chakra recovers at least a little. I'm just gonna be a little tired for the next month and then I'll be as good as new. She said before she leaned up and kissed his lips. You got me out of my seal and out into the real world. I will forever be grateful to you, Naruto-kun. I love you a lot, she said happily. Naruto smiled. Well, now I can say for certain that I love you too, and if you have to stay in bed today, I will go make you breakfast and then come back to feed you, he said as he got out of bed and went over to the kitchen. Kurama couldn't help the smile that crept onto her face as she slowly sat up. Naruto came back a few minutes later holding a plate with pancakes stacked on top of it. In his other hand were a fork and a knife, as well as some maple syrup, whipped cream, and melted chocolate. Naruto placed everything on the table that was next to the bed before he sat down on the bed. He picked the knife before turning to her. Now pick. What do you want on your pancakes? He asked. Kurama grinned. First you put the melted chocolate on the pancake and spread it out. Then you put some whipped cream on top of it and on it you put a little bit of maple syrup, she instructed. Naruto followed her orders. First, he spilled some chocolate on the pancake, using the knife to spread it out. Then he picked the can of whipped cream and started to spray it around the pancake. Finally, he spilled some maple syrup on top of the whipped cream. Naruto suddenly got up and walked out of the room, leaving everything there. He came back a few seconds later with chopped strawberries. He placed them on top of the whipped cream before cutting the pancake into squares. He picked one of the squares on the fork and placed his hand under the fork just in case it fell off. He brought it to her mouth and after she opened it, Naruto placed the fork into her mouth. She closed her mouth and started chewing on the food. Kurama moaned in delight as she tasted the amazing breakfast that her lover made for her. She swallowed. That's amazing, Naruto-kun. You should try it as well, she said happily. Naruto chuckled. This is for you. I will make my own later, he said lovingly. He placed the next bite into her mouth and suddenly, she grabbed his face and forced his mouth onto hers. She passed the food into his mouth using her tongue before pulling back. I told you to try it out. Well, now you did, she said, laughing at the red face of her mate. Naruto swallowed the food and commented in his head about how good it tasted. He simply sighed at his lover's perverted side and continued feeding her. The next morning at the Hokage's office. This morning Kurama was finally able to get out of bed without Naruto's help and so, they decided to go tell the Hokage what happened and ask him a few things. Naruto walked through the village with Kurama next to him and they both noticed the great amount of hate sent Naruto's way and the equally great amount of lust sent Kurama's way. She simply scowled at the man ogling at her while Naruto grinned, knowing that she was his and his alone. They finally made it to the Hokage's office. Naruto walked in, not bothering to knock only to find Hizagi-san reading the same book which Kakashi was reading. Oh, Naruto-kun. What brings you here today? He asked, hiding his book in one of the drawers of his desk. Naruto scowled. Hirohige-san, he mumbled, making Hiruzen chuckle. Suddenly, behind Naruto walked Kurama. She walked in and closed the door behind her. Hiruzen raised an eyebrow at the girl. Naruto-kun, who is that? He asked curiously. Naruto grinned. That's why we're here actually. I want you to meet my lover, Kurama-chan. Although, you might know her better as the Kyuubi. Naruto said and laughed with Kurama as they watched Hiruzen fall out of his chair. Naruto placed some silencing and security tags around the room before sitting in a chair and allowing Kurama to sit in his lap. It was rather awkward as she was 5'7" and he was only 4'10". After all, Naruto was still 5 years old. However, they made it work. Kurama sprouted her fox ears as well as the only tail she was able to regenerate as of yet. Hiruzen got back to his chair and raised an eyebrow. Only one tail? He asked curiously. That was the price for being able to extract her from me without killing me. We had her push all 9 tails of her chakra into my coils, creating 9 new chakra coils in my body and giving me the energy my body was used to so it won't collapse without Kurama-chan in there. As she went out, she took half a tail's worth of my chakra so she would have human chakra and not only demonic, making her able to use chakra without being instantly recognized as the Kyuubi. After all, we want to become shinobi together. Naruto finished explaining with a grin, petting Kurama's tail much to her enjoyment. Hiruzen just dumbly nodded. She was already out yesterday, but she was so low on chakra that she had to stay in bed for the whole day. She has only recovered 1 tail's worth of her chakra, hence why she has only 1 tail. Naruto continued as his own 10 fox tails sprouted out of his backbone. As you can see, the result of her 9 tails of demonic chakra along with my own single tail of chakra resulted in me having 10 tails, he said waving his tails around. Hiruzen could only sigh as he felt a headache coming. Alright. I understand so far. However, I believe you need something from me. He said, fishing for information. Naruto nodded. Yes. We wish to go for the graduation exam when I get to 16 years old. Until then, I would like to stay outside of the academy and even most of the time stay outside of Konoha altogether. You see, I wish to learn how to control my powers. I'll start with either the Mangekyo or the wood release in order to let Kurama recover because she is the only one capable of stopping me if I lose control. In 6 years, I will have everything mastered and then both me and Kurama will be taking the graduation exam," he said. "After we pass that ridiculously easy test, we would like you to place us in a team alone without a third teammate or a sensei. We are already capable of handling most things, but in 6 years' time, Naruto-kun will be able to do it all by himself and so we wish to be placed away from where we could make the job of the shinobi easy to other genin who will later die when we will be promoted and they will be left to do missions with normal genin." Kurama finished for him and Hiruzen nodded, his face serious. "I agree. You should train on controlling your powers somewhere where you couldn't hurt anyone by accident. Also, you are correct in assuming that if I place you with another genin, they will be too shielded from the true reality. I grant you permission to go for only the final exam at the academy as well as leave and enter the village as you please," Hiruzen said seriously. Naruto grinned. "Thank you, Aji-san. You won't regret it. I'm gonna get super strong and then take that hat of yours," he said cheerfully. Hiruzen and Kurama smiled at him. Kurama wrapped her single tail around his waist and stood up, forcing him up as well. She turned her head to look at Hiruzen as both her tail and Naruto's tails disappeared. "We are going to start Naruto-kun's training. Thank you again," she said with a smile as she and Naruto left the room. Hiruzen chuckled to himself. "That boy is going to be a force to be reckoned with when she is done with him," he said to himself before pulling his book back out and starting to read it. Time skip. 6 years later at Konoha's main gate, two figures walked towards the gate. The first form was easily recognizable as Kurama since she didn't change at all. She had knee-length blood-red hair with red eyes that has a vertical slit in the middle of them. She stood at the height of 5'8" and had fair skin. She looked to be around 17 years of age. Her face was heart-shaped and it was equipped with a small button nose and full lips. Her bust size was around an E-cup. Her wide and rather busty chest became thinner at the waist and then flared out into a massive ass. Down from her rather fat ass, her legs went down to thick thighs and long legs. All in all, she was perfect and had the perfect version of an Hercules figure. She wore a red top that strained against her rather large bust and revealed her stomach. That top also had a small V-cut, showing a little bit of her cleavage. She also had a matching skirt that reached down to just a little below her middle thighs and had red shinobi boots. The new addition to her attire was a sword on her left thigh. The man with her, however, was different from Naruto, who was running around the village 6 years ago. Naruto had shoulder-length spiky, wild blonde hair and one blue eye. His other eye was closed with a scar running over it from the forehead down over the eye and just above the mouth. To see how the scar actually looks, look at Zoro from One Piece. In his one blue open eye, there was a vertical slit. He stood at the height of 6'1" and had a slight tan coloring to his skin. He had 3 whisker-like marks on each cheek, along with a strong, square jawline, a straight nose, and full lips. Out of his lips poked 2 sharp fangs. While he might look to be a little older, Naruto was only 16 years old. His body was well muscled. He had big, strong arms, a wide back, an 8-pack for his abs, and a well-muscled chest. He wore a back-open trench coat, it had long sleeves with the symbol of the Uzumaki clan on each of his shoulders. On the upper right side of his coat chest was a small drawing of a fox with 9-10 tails, and on the upper left side, right above his heart was a drawing of a 9-tailed fox. On the lower back of his coat was a symbol for yin and yang, but instead of the normal yin and yang were 2 foxes wrapped up in each other, in the same position of the yin and yang symbol. One of the foxes had 10 tails, and the other had 9. Around his collarbone were 10 red tomos, and on the upper part of his back were the kanji for 9 and 10 next to each other. He had a black pair of Anbu pants with 2 swords strapped to his left thigh and black shinobi boots. The two calmly walked towards the main gate of Konoha, his hand wrapped around her waist and her head resting on his shoulder. The two calmly walked through the main gate of Konoha, only to be stopped by the guards. "Halt. State your business in Konoha," one of them said as both Chunin walked and stood in front of them. They glanced at the man before ogling at the woman. "You're a really pretty one. How about I take you out on a date tonight? Who knows, I might just show you how a real man feels tonight if you'll be a good girl," one of them said to Kurama. She got several tick marks on her head as Naruto placed his head in front of the man's own. He stared into his eyes, they both unflinching. Suddenly, Naruto's eyes glowed red and he blasted the man with his killing intent. "If you ever make such a comment towards her again, I promise you, you will suffer. I will cut your little from your body and shove it down your throat before slowly burning you off," the blonde said. The man took a step back and pissed himself from fear. Naruto and Kurama started walking away from the two towards the Hokage's tower. "And just so you'd know, neither of you stand a chance of satisfying me after what Naruto-koi did to me," Kurama commented as they left, kissing Naruto on the lips with her pupils turned into hearts. The two men stared in shock at the pair. Wasn't Naruto that demon brat? He disappeared 3 years ago, but before he did, he was never this intimidating. One of the guards commented to his scared friend. Meanwhile, Naruto and Kurama walked through the village and ignored the looks they were getting. Both Kurama and Naruto were getting aroused stares. After all, Naruto had his trench coat wide open with no shirt underneath, allowing his bare chest and abs to be revealed. Kurama was just hot in general, so it was obvious that she would be getting those stares. They quickly made it into the Hokage's tower. They walked and made it to the Hokage's office. Like always, Naruto opened the door without bothering to knock. He walked in with Kurama half hiding behind his towering form, wanting to see if the Hokage would recognize Naruto. Naruto grinned. "Hey, Aji-san. It's been quite a bit of time since I last saw you," Naruto said kindly. Hiruzen studied the man for a few seconds before his eyes widened. "And Naruto-kun? Is that you?" he asked in shock. Naruto nodded his head enthusiastically as Kurama stepped next to him. Hiruzen made a hand gesture and his anbu left. Naruto placed a silencing and security seal on the door by simply pressing his hand onto it before sitting down in the empty chair. Like always, Kurama sat in his lap, her back pressed against him and her head resting on his chest. Naruto wrapped his arms around her stomach and placed his head on her shoulder. Hiruzen smiled at the teenager. "Tell me. How have you been in those past 3 years? Ever since you decided that there's no point in coming back to the village every night and decided to live in some cave that is?" he asked, happy that his surrogate grandson has returned. "I'm doing great. Actually, I'm doing better than great. I was able to do everything I wanted to. I can use all 10 tails of my chakra without any problem, use the wood release and Mangekyo Sharingan as easily as throwing a kunai, mastered the flying Raijin, and so much more," Naruto said happily. He then grinned at the old Kage, deciding to play a prank on him. "Though, you should know that I moved out of the village because I didn't want anyone reporting me for making a lot of noise late at night as Kurama usually does," he said teasingly, kissing Kurama's neck. Kurama slightly blushed but decided to go with Naruto. "It's only because you are so good. Those 10 tails of stamina are amazing," she said back as she started rubbing her ass on his crotch. That was it for the old Hokage, and he flew into a wall with a nosebleed. Kurama and Naruto started laughing uncontrollably, rolling on the ground together while laughing. It took them around 5 minutes to calm themselves down and sit back in their seats, while Hiruzen took 5 minutes more than them before getting back to his chair. Hiruzen looked at the laughing couple and could only sigh. "You know, your mother loved to prank me as well," Hiruzen mumbled, making Naruto and Kurama laugh a little more. Hiruzen cleared his throat. "Anyways. Tomorrow is the final exam in the academy. Give this to the teacher. His name is Iruka Yamino, and he is teaching the class of the clan hairs. Inyazuka, Aburam, Hyuga, Yamanaka Akamichi, and they even have the supposed last Uchiha in their class," Hiruzen said, chuckling a little. "Anyways, just be there tomorrow at 8 AM for the exam and try not to do too much trouble for Iruka," Hiruzen said as Naruto and Kurama got up. They decided to get the old Kage with another comment. "Well, see you later Aji-san," Naruto called before turning to Kurama. "The bed in the apartment isn't properly tested yet. You know, I designed a silencing seal just for your screams so we can test out the bed," Naruto said, grinning at the blushing face of his lover. Hiruzen was thrown into the wall behind him once again, his nose bleeding. Naruto laughed before he walked out of the office with Kurama glued to his side. "We're still gonna test that bed, right?" she asked, somewhat shyly. Naruto grinned at her before placing her in front of him and wrapping his arms around her chest. He nibbled on her ear, breathing hot breath into it. "I don't know. I think we need to go home and see if you were a good girl lately," he whispered huskily into her ear. Kurama shivered and whimpered slightly in want. Naruto grinned. "Well, I think you were good enough. Fine, let's go," he said before he scooped her up into his arms bridal style and started running across the rooftops. Kurama grinned excitedly as she felt the strong hands of her lover carry her towards their apartment where she was sure to get the time of her life. Time skip. Next morning, Naruto's eyes slowly opened as they were mercilessly attacked by the sunlight. He could only smile as he saw the big grin on his lover's face. Her beautifully naked form was lying on his naked chest, her arms wrapped around him while she was unconsciously rubbing her face into his chest. He brushed a bit of her hair out of her face before kissing her forehead. She slowly opened her eyes. "Good morning, princess. You had a good night?" Naruto asked with a small smirk. Kurama smiled. "Good morning, Naruto-koi. I had the best night of my life," she said happily. Naruto grinned at her before grabbing her chin and bringing it up to his own, kissing her. Kurama moaned in his mouth, enjoying the loving feeling he gave her. Suddenly, Naruto flipped them around. Kurama was laying on her back with a rather big man holding himself over her. Kurama could feel his rather hard tool on her stomach as he continued to make out with her. A few seconds later, Naruto broke the kiss and Kurama started panting for air. "I think I need to take a shower," he said and got out of bed. As he was going, he turned to her with an evil smirk on his face. "Though I need someone to help me wash my back," he commented. Kurama grinned excitedly as she thought about what could happen in the shower. She quickly ran up to him and went along with the act. "I guess I could help and wash your back for you. Though I might want you to pay me back in some way," she said, grinning. Ash himself started to grin as he crouched down and picked her legs off the ground, throwing her body over his shoulder. Kurama giggled as she hugged his waist, pressing her breasts into his back. It was only lucky for them that they were used to waking up at around 5 or 6 a.m. because that shower took around an hour and a half. After they were done in the shower, Naruto and Kurama came out dressed in their everyday clothes with Kurama slightly leaning on Naruto for support while slightly limping. Naruto sat her down gently, grinning as she slightly whimpered just from sitting down. He started blurring across the kitchen cooking them some breakfast. They had agreed that on the day of their graduation, Naruto would feed Kurama pancakes just like on the day she came out of the seal. He was quickly done and placed the stacked up pancakes onto a plate and the plate on the table in front of Kurama. Naruto quickly picked her up before sitting down and placing her to sit in his lap. Naruto, just like last time, spread the melted chocolate on the pancake before spraying whipped cream onto it and on top of it spilling some maple syrup. He then clicked his finger and a small bush appeared on the table with some fresh strawberries on it. Kurama grinned excitedly as she watched her lover make her the food that quickly became her favorite. Naruto cut the strawberries before placing them onto the whipped cream. Naruto cut a piece of the pancakes before placing it in his mouth. Kurama looked at him in curiosity until her eyes widened when he grabbed her chin and placed his mouth on top of hers. Naruto used his tongue to push the food into her mouth before pulling back and smirking at her blushing face. He took a bite for his own before continuing to feed her the normal way with a fork. They were finally done at 7:55 and left their apartment. Naruto could have simply teleported over to the academy building, but he chose not to. Naruto picked to simply walk over to the place where his carrier would begin, showing off his beautiful maid in the process, and with a slight limp to her step, everyone old enough to understood that the two were rather intimate and that Kurama liked it if the large smile on her face was anything to go by. They slowly walked and made it to the academy building at 8:05 a.m. Naruto looked around the classes until he found the one he needed. He knocked on the door, his arm wrapped around Kurama's waist, while her own arm was wrapped around his waist and her head resting on his shoulder. "Enter," came a voice from the other side of the door. Naruto slid the door open and then walked in with his girl. Naruto ignored the looks everyone in the class was giving him and walked over to the teacher, Iruka, as Hiruzen introduced him. "Good morning. I have been told that the graduation exam would be taking place in this class today. We both have come to participate in it under the orders of the Hokage," Naruto said respectively towards Iruka. He held out the note from the Hokage to the teacher. However, no one was responding as everyone was just staring at Kurama. Either a lustful look or a glare of jealousy or in the rare case, simply a scowl. He grinned towards his mate. "Kurama-chan, I think you broke them," he said, pointing to Iruka and then to the class. Kurama giggled at the subtle compliment which Naruto sent her. A minute later Naruto got irritated. His single open eye had started glowing blue as he glared at everyone in the class, releasing a little bit of his killing intent. "Stop staring or I will hurt you all," Naruto growled. Kurama too has had enough of this. After all, she was only for Naruto to see. Those stares made her feel like she was cheating on her Naruto-koi in some way. Most of the people in the class snapped out of their trance, but what was important was that Iruka snapped out of his trance. He bowed slightly. "I apologize," the teacher said with slight embarrassment in his voice. Naruto waved him off. "It's no problem. Here, take this note from the Hokage, it should explain quite a bit," he said. Iruka took the note and started to read through it. Meanwhile, Naruto smirked. "Now they might get off of us," he said to his mate. She raised an eyebrow. "What does that supposed to mean?" she asked curiously. Naruto grinned. "You didn't read what was written in the letter, but you'll hear about it soon enough," he said teasingly, squeezing her tighter into his body. As Iruka read the letter, he started to understand why Naruto got so angry at them for just looking. "Good morning, Iruka. I apologize for not telling you earlier, but I didn't know if they were gonna make it back to the village in time." Naruto Uzumaki and his wife Kurama Uzumaki had been training together outside of the village for the past 3 years and only returned yesterday. "I wish for you to take them and have them participate in the exam today. You can put them against your strongest students in the sparring if you want to test them for real, but I assure you, you will not be disappointed. From your Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi." The letter left Iruka quite surprised. It was no wonder that Naruto got angry. After all, they were staring at his wife like she was some piece of meat and they were a pack of hungry wolves. He walked over to the front of his class and spoke. "Well, class, we have 2 new students today for the exam. They were out of the village for the past 3 years training and have returned to take the exams yesterday. Please, be nice to Naruto Uzumaki and his wife, Kurama Uzumaki," he said with a grin. What no one noticed was the way Kurama's face gained an atomic blush, her knees buckled and her eyes started to tear up. Naruto held her close to him as a few tears fell from her eyes. What? She weakly whispered to Naruto. Her man just grinned at her. Your right skirt pocket, he whispered back. Kurama pushed her hand into her pocket and pulled out what Naruto placed in there. It was a ring with a rather big diamond on it. Into the diamond was carved the kanji for the number 9, and inside of the diamond was a small tag with Naruto's flying Raijin seal on it. Kurama shakily placed it on her right ring finger. She wrapped her arms around Naruto and pecked him on the lips. I love you so much, she whispered to him. Naruto smiled as he held her right hand, rubbing her new ring. I love you more, he said with a smile. Meanwhile, the class was shouting about how unfair it was that they just came for the last exam. Iruka ignored them and waited for everyone to calm down. Once they did, the last Uchiha spoke of his displeasure. How come those clanless losers get to simply come for the last exam while me, an Uchiha elite, needs to go through 10 boring years of this stupid place, he said in anger. Iruka sighed, but Naruto spoke before he could. We were training outside of the village so I could learn to control my power without killing anyone in the process. It is rather hard to control and in the beginning, I lost control quite often. Had I come here, you'd all probably be dead. I got special permission from the Hokage to take my wife away from the village with me so that she could calm me down whenever I lost myself. And that is why we are granted permission to enter straight into the final exam. Naruto said coldly. Iruka looked at him in shock. He knew who or what Naruto was and couldn't be happier that the Hokage sent him away to train on controlling the beast. Sasuke scowled. Please, what power could a pathetic loser like you have that would threaten the likes of me, he said arrogantly. Naruto scowled but before he could reply, Iruka walked over to them. I know what you hold, but I think you shouldn't tell the students. The teacher whispered. Naruto waved him off. He doesn't deserve to know, he whispered back. Naruto turned his glare toward Sasuke. That is none of your business. If you have any problems in the way both myself and my wife got to this exam, you're welcome to take that to the Hokage and discuss your problems with him, he said as he grabbed Kurama's hand and dragged her to a seat in the last line where he sat her in his lap. Everyone looked at the couple for a few seconds before something clicked in their heads. Wait, how old are you? One of the other students asked. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the question. We're both 16 years old. Why do you ask? He asked, genuinely curious to know why their age would be something that the students would care about. If you're still the same age as us, how the hell are you already married? The same student asked. Naruto glared at him. First of all, this is none of your business. We're married because I asked her to and she agreed. Our age doesn't matter because as you can see, our bodies are already a lot more mature than your little premature bodies, he said, almost growling at the end. They were trying to take his Kurama-chan away from him and he was not going to let that happen. Before Naruto could start beating the shit out of them all, Iruka cleared his throat. If you're all done harassing the new students, we can finally begin the exam. We're going to start with a written exam so bring out your pencils and we will give your exam sheet to you, he said and started giving exam sheets to the students. Naruto sadly placed Kurama on the chair next to his, making her pout cutely. Just finish the exam quickly and you could come back, he said to her before unsealing a container of ink with 2 brushes. Iruka made his way through the class until he made it to the final line where Naruto and Kurama sat alone. He placed their exam sheets on the table and raised an eyebrow. Ink and brush isn't a common tool in our times. What happened to a pen? Iruka asked curiously. Naruto shrugged. No one ever said anything about a written exam at the graduation of Shinobi, so I didn't bring one. As a member of the Uzumaki clan, I studied Fuinjutsu from an early age, and so, I always carry ink and brushes on me in a storage seal. Since we need to write with something, I assumed that using the ink wouldn't be so bad, Naruto explained though he spoke silently so the other students wouldn't hear. Iruka slowly nodded his head, surprise on his face. He went back to the front of the class before turning to the students. Alright, you can start. You have an hour to finish this exam and once you're done, place it on my table, he said, and everyone got started. Naruto took a look at the first question and had to hold himself from laughing. The questions were very basic. The first question was in history. What was the name of the 4th Hokage? And what was his most famous jutsu? Naruto wanted to answer with he was my father, but he held himself back. He knew the Kurama would be jumping into his lap every minute now, so he had to finish this quickly. He quickly answered all of the questions, most of which were about Naruto's family in all 4 of the cages, the Sannin and Madara Uchiha. He went on to the next section which was math. Simple questions like if a kunai traveled at the speed of 10 miles per hour, how much time would it take the kunai to pass 5 miles? After he finished all of the math, he went on to the last thing, the history of other villages. The questions were like the 4th Hokage killed 1,000 shinobi with a single jutsu during the 3rd Great Ninja War. Which village did the shinobi belong to? Were asked. Naruto knew about his father and grandfather's hubby to piss off Iwa, and so, he knew the answer. He continued to blur through the questions, and 2 minutes into the exam, Naruto stood up, followed by Kurama a few seconds later. They both placed the brushes into the ink container and started walking down towards where Iruka sat. They placed the exam sheets onto his desk much to his surprise and went back to their seat where Naruto sat down and Kurama sat in his lap. Everyone took a few seconds to look in complete shock at the pair who finished in under 2 minutes of the exam's beginning. Kurama just pressed her breasts into Naruto's lower chest and rested her head on his chest, her arms wrapped up around his back. Naruto just wrapped his own arms around her back and smiled down at her. Kurama finally allowed tears to fall down her cheeks as she started sobbing lightly. She brought her right hand in front of her face and looked at her new ring. She finally had time to analyze it and she had to say, it was beautiful. She raised her head and looked at Naruto through teary eyes. "Thank you, Naruto. The ring is beautiful. I love you so much," she said as a few tears fell down her cheeks. Naruto smiled as he kissed her cheeks dry. Naruto kissed her lips for a few seconds before pulling back and looking her straight in the eyes. "Don't thank me. You earned it. You are the only reason I got out of my childhood with my mind intact," he said before he actually thought about it. "Actually, mostly intact," he said jokingly, making Kurama giggle lightly. "Let's leave the matter of my sanity to another day. For now, I want you to know that I love you. I am yours just like you are mine forever," he said before kissing her again. Kurama nodded, their lips still together. They broke the kiss and Naruto brought his hand to the back of her head. He pushed her head into his bare chest before starting to rub her back. Kurama wrapped her hands around his back once again and pulled herself as close as she could into his body. They continued sitting like that in silence for the rest of the exam, ignoring the looks everyone around them sent them. After an hour was done, Iruka collected the papers from all of those who didn't finish yet and went back to the front of the class. "Alright, class. Now we will be moving out to the academy training grounds so we could do the accuracy test, Taijutsu spars and ninjutsu exams," he called as he started to leave the class. All of the students got out of their chairs and onto their feet before walking out after Iruka. Naruto and Kurama took their time. They slowly got up. Naruto smirked as he noticed something. "Kurama-chan, look what you did," he said teasingly as he pointed at his crotch area that had a puddle in his pants. Kurama's face resembled a tomato as she looked away from Naruto's eyes. I'm sorry, Naruto. I just got excited," she said in complete embarrassment. Naruto just grinned teasingly as he used fire nature chakra to dry his pants. "Don't mention it. Though once this exam is over we should do something about your excitement," he said as he wrapped his arms around her shoulders and they started to walk, still connected. They made it outside to the training grounds just as Iruka started explaining what they needed to do for the test. "Each of you in his turn will be getting 10 kunai and 10 shurikens. You will throw them towards the target and do your best to hit the bullseye. In order to pass, you are going to need to hit the bullseye at least 4 times with each weapon," Iruka explained, and some of the students started to sweat at the number of times they needed to hit. Those students were, of course, civilians. Most of the clan heirs could easily hit the bullseye 4 times out of 10. Iruka started calling names to start throwing, and by the time he made it to Naruto and Kurama, only the clan heirs and a few civilians were left at the training grounds, the rest failed and went home to tell their parents. "Kurama Uzumaki," Iruka called. Kurama left Naruto's arms much to her displeasure and walked over to where Iruka placed the weapons. She lazily placed 3 kunai in each of her hands and threw them all at once. She hit everything in the center of the target and proceeded to do the same with the remaining 4 kunai, as well as all 10 shurikens. Naruto went up next and picked up the shuriken first. He placed the first 3 in his hand and threw them one by one in quick succession, like a certain cyborg ninja does. 1. He then picked the remaining 7, 4 in one hand and 3 in the other. He threw them all at once and hit the bull's eye with all 10 of his shuriken lined up with no space between each other. He did the same with the kunai, hitting the bull's eye with all 10 kunai lined up perfectly. Iruka and the other students looked in absolute shock at the display of accuracy which both Naruto and Kurama were able to pull off. The two were silently congratulating each other with kisses, not caring that everyone else was just looking at them. Iruka quickly snapped out of his shock. "Alright, class. This exam is over. Let's move on to Taijutsu. Each of you will spar with one of the other students. Try to keep it male versus male and female versus female. Also, try to keep the fight going for at least a minute so I could assess both student skills." Iruka finished and everyone nodded. However, before they could all break up into pairs, Iruka spoke again. "Sasuke, I want you to spar with Naruto and the same with Sakura and Kurama," he said. Naruto raised an eyebrow. "Why those two?" he asked curiously. Sasuke smirked. "Why do you ask? Don't think you can beat me?" he asked. Naruto shook his head and shrugged. Nah, it's just that you are probably all bark and no bite, and the girl over there is a fangirl. By the way, she looked at you for the whole day I was here, Naruto explained. Before Sasuke could protest or Sakura could start shouting for her, Sasuke Haruka spoke. Well, you see, the Hokage told me in that letter to put you and your wife against the best we have in the class currently. Sasuke has the highest grades in the class, and Sakura has the highest grades out of the Kunoichi, Haruka explained. Naruto shrugged his shoulders before he smirked at Sasuke. Fine. I just hope the duck ass over there has any bite on him, otherwise, he won't be enough to show you my skills, he said, his sharp fangs showing through his smirk. Sasuke scowled as he walked towards the battlefield. Let's go, loser. I'll show you the power of an Uchiha elite, he said as he got into his fighting stance. Haruka stood next to the battlefield and watched as Naruto simply stood there, his hands in his pockets. Ready? Haruka asked. Both Naruto and Sasuke nodded their heads. Haruka looked at Naruto's form and couldn't help but frown at the fact that he was taking Sasuke so lightly. Nevertheless, he began the fight. Begin. He said. Sasuke ran at Naruto with all of the speed he could muster and sent a punch towards his face. Naruto tilted his head to the right, dodging Sasuke's punch. Sasuke noticed that Naruto's left eye was closed like always, so he thought Naruto couldn't see his hand. Sasuke tried to punch Naruto from the left, but he simply leaned back, dodging the attack again. Sasuke sent a spin kick towards Naruto, who simply jumped above the attack, hands still in his pockets. Sasuke quickly recovered and tried a snap kick into Naruto's stomach. However, Naruto simply shifted his weight to the right. Sasuke's kick missed and he retracted his leg. Sasuke tried a jab, cross, hook combination, but Naruto simply tilted his head to the right, avoiding Sasuke's jab, then tilted his head to the left to avoid the cross, and finally, he crouched to avoid the hook. That was when Naruto's mental count reached a minute and Naruto shifted his weight to one leg, still crouching before he lifted his right leg and kicked Sasuke into the air and knocked him out at the same time. Naruto appeared under Sasuke and with one hand held upwards, he allowed Sasuke's back to land on his hand instead of simply letting him fall onto the ground. Naruto placed Sasuke onto the ground somewhat gently before he disappeared and appeared behind Kurama, with his chest pressing into her back and his arms wrapped around her shoulders. Kurama squealed as she turned her head and kissed Naruto. She was the only one to be able to follow his speed and she got excited watching him fight. They broke their kiss and she grinned at him. I love to see you in action. It's so arousing to me, seeing my strong man fighting like that, she whispered onto his lips before kissing him again. Naruto grinned as they broke their second kiss. Well, like I said before, we're gonna have to take care of that later. That body of yours is only for me to see, he whispered back to her. Just then, they heard a shriek. Sasuke-kun. They both turned to look and saw Sakura kneeling next to Sasuke, her ear to his heart and her hand holding on to his own. They both sweat dropped as Sakura was acting as if Sasuke was dying. Suddenly, Sakura got up and walked over to the couple. She cocked her fist back and went to punch Naruto, but he simply stayed there, his eyes closing. Suddenly, just before Sakura could hit Naruto, Kurama grabbed her head and glared at her, her red eyes glowing. Your fight is with me, not him, she growled. He hurt my Sasuke-kun. I will kill him. Sakura screeched. Kurama scowled. Listen here. You should know that in a spar, sometimes, people would get hurt. The Uchiha is not going to die, so please, for the safety of our ears, stop screaming. I'll give you some advice. You should start training more seriously because, with no skill or any sex appeal, you will not get far in this world. She said coldly. Everyone started laughing at Sakura, who was finally allowed to have her fist back. Kurama kissed Naruto one last time before walking off to the arena. Naruto just smirked. His girl was the strongest and most beautiful girl in the world. Other than that, she had a sharp tongue which ended up making things interesting and more amusing for him. Sakura and Kurama stood on the battlefield across from each other as Haruka got into his position as the referee after taking Sasuke to the academy nursery. Ready? He asked. Both girls nodded, Kurama sporting a big taunting smirk while Sakura glared at her. Begin. Haruka called. Sakura instantly dashed towards Kurama, her fist cocked back. Kurama, much like Naruto did before her, simply sidestepped the attack. However, she wasn't as nice as Naruto was and had decided to taunt her opponent. She gave Sakura a slight push on her back in her punching position, making Sakura stumble forward and struggle to stay on her feet. You need to work on your aim, it sucks. Kurama taunted. Sakura growled as she straightened up. The pink-haired girl rushed forward for another punch, but she was dodged again. Sakura watched as Kurama tilted her head to the side, avoiding her punch. She didn't give up just yet and quickly took back her hand before throwing a spin kick. Kurama dodged that too by leaning back and allowing Sakura's foot to pass in front of her. Sakura jumped back to try and get some space away from Kurama and think. However, just then, her minute was over. Kurama appeared in front of her in an instant and flicked her rather large forehead with her middle finger. Sakura was sent flying back with her consciousness taken away. She flew out of the arena and quite far away from it before dropping to the ground. Kurama grinned as she watched Sakura's unconscious form on the ground. She mouthed a silent "Take that, you bitch, no one tries to punch my Narukoi," and gets away with it toward Sakura before she disappeared. She appeared in Naruto's waiting arms and wrapped her legs around his waist, along with her hands around his neck. Kurama quickly placed her mouth over his own, getting her congratulatory kiss. Iruka wasn't even surprised anymore. He simply took Sakura to the infirmary and continued calling the next matches. It was finally time for the ninjutsu test. "Alright. I'm gonna call you all one by one. You are going to need to make at least 2 clones, substitute with a log, and finally, transform into me," he said. That was uneventful. Most of those who made it all the way to the ninjutsu test were able to do the required techniques. Soon it was Kurama's turn. "Alright, Kurama Uzumaki," Iruka called as the girl stepped forward. "First, make at least 2 clones," he instructed. Kuri made a cross with her fingers and 2 clones puffed into existence next to her. Iruka nodded, confirming that it was alright for her to dispel them. Once the clones were gone, Iruka placed a log on the ground next to him. "Substitute with this log," he said. Kurama didn't even need to do any hand seals as in a puff of smoke, the log and her swapped locations. Iruka nodded. "Now transform into me. Try and make it look like me as much as you can," he instructed. Kurama puffed into smoke and out of it came a perfect copy of Iruka. He nodded for the final time before going through the exact same thing with Naruto. Finally, he was done with everyone and he could go to calculate their scores. He came back into the class where all of the students, even those who failed, were waiting for him. Iruka stood at the front of the class, looking at the students. "Alright, the results are here. The highest score on the exam goes to Naruto Uzumaki and Kurama Uzumaki. However, since they both arrived only for the last exam, the titles of Rookie of the Year go to Sasuke Uchiha and Kunoichi of the Year goes to Sakura Haruno," Iruka said, and everyone was silent as both Sasuke and Sokka were still at the infirmary. Iruka started to go through everyone who passed, giving them a headband. He made it to the final row where Naruto and Kurama sat. "Congratulations, you both passed the exam with a perfect 100% score," he said with a smile as he handed them both a headband. They smiled at him. "Thank you, Iruka," Naruto said for them both. Once given their headband, Naruto placed his on his forehead while Kurama had Naruto help her tie hers around her neck. Once done placing their headbands on them, they both walked out of the classroom, only being stopped by Iruka so he could tell them that they needed to be at the academy in a week for the team announcements. Chapter 2. First real fight. Naruto and Kurama just used Naruto's flying Raijin to teleport away from the academy after getting their headbands. They appeared just outside of a food stand and walked in, pushing the curtains out of the way. Like always, Kurama was wrapped in Naruto's arms. They went over to where the bar was and Naruto sat down on the chair in the middle, setting Kurama in his lap. "Boy. Tuchi Ajaisen. Make some ramen to the strongest genin in existence," Naruto shouted. The man came out of the kitchen section of the stand. He wore his chief uniform and had dark gray hair. His skin is light brown and his eyes are always seen close. He also has eyebrows too. "Oh, Naruto-kun. Kurama-chan. You're finally back," he asked in surprise as he had not seen his favorite customer and his girlfriend in the past 3 years. He smiled before turning around. "Am. Get over here," he shouted. A few seconds later, a woman came out of the back. She was a slender girl with long dark brown hair and large black eyes, plus fair skin. She wears a white robe with the sleeves folded, a sort of dark blue apron with ribbon ties at the top, and a bright white bandana. "What is it, Tusan?" she asked as she stepped next to him. "Look who's back," he said happily. Am looked at the only people in the ramen stand and her eyes widened. In an instant, Am appeared in front of them and leaned over the table, hugging the two. "Naruto-kun. Kurama-chan. You're finally back," she shouted in happiness. Both Naruto and Kurama hugged her back. Am had slowly become something of an older sister figure to Naruto and a great friend for Kurama, and so, the two liked her very much. The three broke the hug. "So? How about you get us some ramen?" Naruto asked excitedly. Tucci laughed. "Sure, I'll be right back," he said and left to the back. Finally, Am noticed the new ring on Kurama's finger. She squealed. "Kurama-chan, did Naruto-kun give you that ring?" she asked excitedly. Kurama blushed slightly. "Yeah, it was actually earlier today, the Hokage introduced us as a married couple, and Naruto didn't deny it. He got this ring out of nowhere and placed it in my pocket, so when the academy teacher called me Kurama Uzumaki, he was quick to tell me where the ring was," she explained, pressing her back into Naruto and turning her head before kissing him. Am squealed again as she started jumping up and down. After all, her best friend and little brother were now officially married, as the Hokage declared them as such. As Am calmed down, Tucci came out of the back with 2 steaming bowls of ramen. He placed them in front of Naruto and Kurama before smiling at them. "Well, since you two are celebrating such an important thing, the first round is in the house," he declared. Naruto grinned. "Thanks, Aji-san," Naruto said before he held his chopsticks in his hands. "Itadakimasu," he shouted before he started to inhale his ramen. He was quickly done and placed his bowl aside before pushing his chopsticks into Kurama's bowl and bringing the ramen to her mouth. Kurama happily ate the food fed to her, enjoying the taste of the food as well as the touch of the one feeding her. It was 30 minutes and 60 bowls later, 50 of which Naruto ate, they were done and had gone out of Ichiraku's ramen stand to go home. They quickly made it home and got in, locking the door after them while also activating the seal combination. Silencing and security seals. They walked towards the bedroom and when they made it in, Naruto suddenly grabbed both of Kurama's hands, spreading them apart above her head. He placed his leg between her knees and pushed upwards, drawing a moan out of his lover. He pushed her onto her back and quickly followed her, laying on top of her on the bed. Naruto placed his mouth on top of her own, his hand still preventing her from resisting. Kurama simply moaned into his mouth as she felt his thigh working her sensitive areas over. Naruto released her mouth before he leaned down and slightly bit down on her neck, drawing a very pleased moan from Kurama. "You know," he said, drawing her attention to him. Kurama looked at him through clouded eyes as he continued to pleasure her. "You never actually answered, so how about it? Ready to become Kurama Uzumaki? Or would you prefer Namikaze? Or maybe Senju-Urache?" he asked. "Oh? Yes. I am ready. It would be an honor for me to become your wife, Naruto-koi. It would be an honor for me to become Kurama Uzumaki." She moaned loudly as she hit her climax and had her orgasm wash over her. Her eyes rolled into the back of her head and her head shot back as she accepted the first and only marriage proposal that will ever be sent her way by a worthy man. She was ready to officially belong to Naruto, take his last name, take his problems and take everything that is wrong with him and do her very best to make it better. She was ready to become Naruto's wife and spend the rest of itinerary with her equally as a mortal husband. She was finally ready to walk alongside her love and become his and only his. Naruto smiled at her answer as he leaned back up and kissed her lips. "Good. So from today until the end of time, your name is Kurama Uzumaki and you are mine," he said possessively as he held her closer to his body. At night, neither of them got any sleep and even at 10 a.m. the next morning, they were still fucking like foxes in heat. A week later, it was finally the day of the team announcement. It will be happening in 2 hours and Naruto was starting to wake up in his apartment, the form of his sleeping and quite naked lover laying on top of him. He smiled as he watched her form almost glowing in the sunlight. Had she not been a demon fox, he would have thought that she was an angel with her beautiful looks and with her body glowing in the sunlight like that. He kissed her forehead. "Wake up, sleeping beauty. We need to get to the academy in a few hours," Naruto whispered in a gentle tone into her ear. Kurama moaned as she stretched her arms, her breasts jiggling and pushing forward much to Naruto's enjoyment. She smiled lovingly at Naruto before she leaned down and kissed him on his lips. "Good morning, Narukoi," she said as she yawned cutely. Naruto smiled at her. "Good morning to you too, Kura-chan. How about we go take a shower? I think my back is a little dirty, but I'm afraid that I can't reach there," he said suggestively. Kurama grinned. "Sure, I'll help you wash your back, though you're gonna have to pay up like always," she said as she crossed her arms under her bust, pushing her breasts upwards. Naruto grinned back as he pulled her back on top of him and got up, lifting her over his shoulder. Kurama giggled excitedly as she placed kisses all over Naruto's lower back. Yep, that was just another ordinary morning in the apartment of Naruto and Kurama Uzumaki. An hour later and they were out. Naruto was dressed only in his boxers and Kurama was dressed only in a red bra and a matching thong. Naruto carried her bridal style as they went towards the kitchen. Once there, Naruto placed Kurama on one of the chairs. He went into the kitchen and allowed all 10 of his tails to sprout out of his back. His tails quickly stretched all around the kitchen and started opening drawers and pulling ingredients out of the fridge. Kurama grinned excitedly. "So Narukoi, you're making me pancakes, right?" she asked excitedly as she started drooling slightly. Naruto turned his head towards her and shook his head with a serious look on his face. "Nope, it's time we eat something else for breakfast," he said, making Kurama pout cutely while puffing her cheeks out. "But why?" she whined. "They are perfect. There is no need to eat anything else," she said, defending her pancakes. Naruto's tails stopped working on preparing the ingredients and all of the other things Naruto was going to need for breakfast. "Well, for starters, I don't want you getting fat on me. Other than that, your nasty sweet tooth is not something healthy, you need to eat things other than pancakes, after all, you've been eating it as breakfast, lunch and dinner for the past week," Naruto explained. Kurama disappeared and appeared at the corner of the kitchen, a dark aura surrounding her and a rain cloud above her head. She was drawing circles on the floor with her finger as she crouched down next to the floor. Naruto sweat dropped as he looked at Kurama's depressed form. Well, I guess one last time won't hurt. She is going to become a kunoichi and will get more activity to burn away the extra fat also. Her demonic chakra will transfer any excess carbs into other things that her body needs, and with the sex we have, she burns a lot of calories every day anyways, he thought as he sighed heavily. He walked over to her corner and crouched down next to her. He noticed a few tears on her cheeks and frowned slightly. He wiped away her tears and smiled lovingly at her. Please don't cry. You know I'm right after all, you said the same thing to me when I was still eating ramen all day long, he said as he rubbed her back comfortingly. Kurama turned to look at him with teary, big puppy dog eyes. I know, she said as she sobbed lightly. It's just that I really wanted pancakes today, please, just for today, I promise that from tomorrow, we will only eat pancakes when you allow it, she begged. After all, it will only be fair if he controlled when she ate her favorite food, just as she controlled when they were going to eat ramen. Naruto smiled. Fine. But you'd better not behave like this tomorrow, because tomorrow I will not break and we will eat something else, even if I have to push some silverware down your throat and force you to swallow. He said. Kurama instantly lost the tears in her eyes as she stopped sobbing. She jumped forward and kissed Naruto, tackling him to the ground. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I love you so much, Narukoi. She shouted in happiness, the act of depression and sadness which she used to make Naruto give in completely gone. Naruto just laughed at her sudden change of attitude as he got up, picking her up bridal style as he stood. He placed Kurama back on the chair and went back to his place in the kitchen. Kurama watched in amazement and excitement as Naruto used his hands and tails to dance around the kitchen, making her favorite food in the process. Not 20 minutes later and Kurama was sitting in front of a pile of pancakes, her mouth drooling and her eyes shining. Naruto smiled as he sat next to her and started preparing the pancakes the way she liked them. He was quickly done and had started feeding her with a fork. Kurama happily gulped down all of the food, purring happily as she did so. She shared a little bit of it with Naruto, but kept most to herself. Once done, Naruto and Kurama left the house, the fox lady happily smiling as she was wrapped in the arms of her lover. They slowly made their way towards the academy building where the team announcements would be taking place. Naruto walked into Iruka's classroom, Kurama wrapped in his right arm and pressed back into his chest as his hand snaked around her own chest. The two ignored the stares that they could clearly feel on their backs as they made it towards the last row just like last week. Naruto decided to finally take a look around at the other new genin. There were 8 other people there besides Naruto and Kurama. The first was a plump boy who was eating some potato chips which he pulled out of a bag. He had brown waist-length hair, black eyes, and he wore his headband around his forehead. He sports a red suit with plated armor on his torso, arms, and upper legs, having the kanji for food on the front. In his earlobes were studs. The second was a girl. She had fair skin, light blue eyes, and long platinum blonde hair worn in a ponytail, with bangs framing the right side of her face. Her ponytail extends all the way to her waist with a single bang of it hanging over her right eye. She had a very well-developed body with high C to low D cup breasts. She wore a purple top that revealed her shoulders and stomach and strained against her rather developed bust. Other than that, she wore a purple straight skirt that reached to her knees. She wore her headband around her neck. Next was another boy. He had narrow brown eyes and a typical expression suggesting he is either bored or irritated. He had shoulder-length black hair tied in a spiky ponytail. He wore the standard Konohinen outfit, the only customizations being green-lined mesh armor on his wrists and ankles, and the plate of his forehead protector sewn into his left sleeve. He had studs in his ears. Next was another boy. He had messy brown hair, sharp black eyes with vertical slit-like pupils, pronounced canine teeth, and nails that he could change into claws. He also has the distinctive red fang markings of the Inyazuka clan on his cheeks. He had a black-colored headband with a Konohagakure forehead protector on his forehead. He wore a nowadays-styled leather form-fitting black jacket with zips over the chest and sleeves, along with black pants and sandals, also zipped, matching the jacket. Next was another girl. She was a slender girl of fair complexion who had lavender pupil-less eyes and dark blue hair styled in a Haim cut, which reached all the way to her lower back, both of the features suggesting that she was a member of the Hyuga clan. She stood at the average height of 5'5" and had a very well-developed body. She had well-developed breasts, at least a D cup and a nice curved body. However, it was difficult to notice due to her clothing. She wore a loose-fitting, lavender and cream-headed jacket with lavender cuffs over mesh armor. She also wears navy blue pants, black, low-heeled sandals, and changes the cloth of her forehead protector from blue to black. Next was another boy. He was barely recognizable as his eyes were hidden by sunglasses, his whole body down to his knees was covered by a light gray jacket, and his head was covered with a hood. He wore long Anbu black pants, his lower face was covered by the high collar of his jacket, and his sunglasses were circular. The only part of his skin which was visible was his palms and they were fair-skinned. The last 2 people were the 2 people who Naruto and Kurama actually got to interact with. those two being Sasuke and Sakura. Sakura had long pink hair that reached to around mid-thigh and emerald green eyes. She was fair-skinned. She had a very large forehead and wore her headband with a forehead protector inside of her hair on top of her head. Her chest was practically non-existent and her hips were very small. She wore a red tank top with a pink apron-like skirt. Under the skirt she wore black biker shorts. On her hands she wore gloves and on her elbows she wore pink elbow guards. On her feet she wore a pair of low-heeled knee-high boots and finally she had a kunai holster on her right thigh. Sasuke had black eyes and black hair shaped in the form of a duck's butt. His skin was fair and he was constantly scowling. However, his scowl looked like a pout and while no one dared to tell him that, Naruto and Kurama didn't fear him so for the first time, Sasuke was going to get teased because of his pouting. He wore a gray, short-sleeved shirt that was open at his chest. He had a dark blue pair of baggy pants and he wore black arm guards to cover his forearms. Finally, Iruka stepped into the class with another teen. He had short, straight black hair and dark eyes which contrast with his translucent-looking pale skin. He was carrying a small backpack. He wears a short black and gray jacket with red straps. He also carries a tipless stamp on his back. The rest of his outfit consisted of a high-collared midriff shirt, black pants, shinobi sandals and gloves with his index and thumb fingers exposed, most likely to use some kind of technique with his fingertips. Iruka walked towards the front of the class, the new teen following closely behind him. "Good morning everyone. I'm happy to say that everyone here will be getting into a new genin team today. This young man, Sai, will be joining one of the teams along with the rest of you all, as there was an odd number. Now, if you will, I would like to start reading out the teams," Iruka said cheerfully as the teen, Sai as Iruka introduced him, sat down in the first row. "Now, let me start and try not to interrupt me," Iruka said as he cleared his throat. "Since teams 1 to 6 are being appointed in other classes, I shall start with team 7. Team 7 will be Sakura Haruno, Sasuke Uchiha and Sai under the teaching of Kakashi Haddock," Iruka declared and was interrupted by loud screaming. "Yes. I always knew that my true love for Sasuke-kun will win," Sakura shouted as she started jumping around. Meanwhile, Naruto hummed. "That is rather interesting with Iro Oniasen as a teacher, the Uchiha might actually become a better person or he might just become even worse as he will have to wait for it to arrive every morning as well as deal with his porn reading," he said in thought. Kurama lightly giggled as an evil grin appeared on her face. "We should probably send some clones to film him slowly losing his cool as he waits for the pervert to arrive," she said, rubbing her hands together evilly. Naruto laughed and kissed her on the lips. "That's the reason I love you so much, you always have such great ideas. For example, yesterday night in bed," he trailed off as Kurama blushed. She buried her head back into Naruto's shoulder as she hid her face under her hands. Naruto chuckled as he leaned down next to her ear. "You know you might be even more perverted than Iro Oniasen or Aji-san," he whispered huskily into her ear, making her blush more. Naruto laughed as he turned her around in his lap and pressed her chest into his own. He pulled her arms from her face and kissed her on the lips. "Don't be embarrassed, that's the side of you I like the most, the real you," he said as he laughed, kissed her again and pulled her closer, rubbing her back as her head rested on his shoulder. Kurama smiled to herself as she placed her hands on Naruto's exposed abs and rubbed them, enjoying his warmth and enjoying the thought that she found such a handsome man for herself. Iruka cleared his throat after Sakura calmed down. "Anyways, team 8 will be Hinata Hyuga, Kiba Inuzuka and Shino Aburam, under the teaching of Kurana Yuhi," he said and waited for a reaction. However, he sighed in relief as none came. He smiled. "Since Team 9 is already assembled from last year, we will be moving on to Team 10. Team 10 will be Shikamaru Nara, Choji Akimichi and Ino Yamanaka, under the teaching of Asuma Sarutobi." He finished and once again there was no vocal reaction, though Ino did scowl and huff in annoyance. Finally, the last team will be Team 11. That team will consist of Naruto Uzumaki and his wife, Kurama Uzumaki. They will have no third teammate, nor will they have a sensei as per the orders of the Hokage," he announced. That was it and the class broke into an uproar. Some were laughing at the two, saying that they weren't even worth a sensei, and some were jealous of the two as they thought themselves to be better than anyone else and thinking that even their senseis will be holding them back. Naruto unleashed his chakra, not even releasing killing intent, but still releasing enough to make everyone shut up. As Iruka said, "This is per the orders of the Hokage. If you have any problems, go take it up with him. If you don't, shut up and sit down to wait for your senseis. You will need to wait a while, especially Team 7, since Iro Oniasen has a habit of being a little late," Naruto said, smiling as he got up, Kurama in his hands. The two walked calmly out of the class and only once gone, Naruto's chakra pressure disappeared. The weaker of the new genin let out sighs of relief as Iruka chuckled lightly at Naruto's nickname for Kakashi. "Hokage's office, Aji-san. Your favorite ninja has arrived for his first official mission along with his hot wife." Naruto shouted as he kicked the door of the Hokage office open and walked in, Kurama wrapped up in his arms. Hiruzen chuckled lightly. "It's good to see you, Naruto-kun. Let me check what missions I have for you. As you might have assumed, since it's your first mission, I can't give you anything more than a D-rank mission, so that'll have to do for now. I know it might be a little boring for you too, but you need at least 5 D-ranked missions done before you can take your first mission," he said. Naruto sadly nodded. "Fine, tell me what you need us to do. You can give me like a few hundred non-fighting missions, and I'll send my clones to do them. Since my parents' bank account is almost gone because of all of the money the village took from it, as well as Kurama's quite expensive ring, I just thought I might as well get some money back," Naruto said, grinning. Hiruzen smiled. "Sure, I'll go check what I have for you," he said as he went over to one of the closets of the office where he pulled a big box with the letter D on it. Hiruzen sat back in his chair and pushed his hand into it. He pulled out a few dozens of paper sheets. He placed them on the table. "Take those ones for now. For you too, there is this mission," he said as he picked one of the papers and handed it to Naruto. "This is a mission to recover the cat of the daimyo's wife. You shouldn't have too much trouble with it, as this mission is usually done by genin squads to better the team's ability to work together," Hiruzen said as Naruto sealed the paper away. Hiruzen motioned to the other papers on his table. "For your clones, I've got easier missions. Painting fences and walls, walking the Inyazuka dogs and helping some shopkeepers organize new supplies," Hiruzen finished explaining as he puffed smoke out of his pipe. Naruto grinned as he counted the missions. He sealed away his 50 counted mission requests before turning and waving at the old cage. "See ya later, Aji-san. I'm gonna show the world how awesome Naruto Uzumaki and his super hot wife are. Thanks for the missions," he shouted as he and Kurama were leaving. "Yes indeed, thank you for the missions, they shall be of great help to us, so I would like to thank you as well, Hiruzen-san," Kurama said as she bowed her head towards the man whom her love saw as a grandfather. Hiruzen smiled at the TW. "No problem, you two. Just get out there and make all of the village proud," he said. The two left, and once outside, Naruto and Kurama easily made 50 shadow clones. Naruto divided them into groups of 1 Kurama and 1 Naruto in each team before giving the teams their mission. The teams were quickly all gone, and both the original Naruto and Kurama were left there alone. Naruto wrapped his arm around Kurama before they disappeared in a yellow flash and appeared somewhere in Konoha's forest. "Kura-chan, I can sense the cat a little to our right. However, we should probably split up so it wouldn't get away on the slim chance that it is able to detect us," Naruto said telepathically towards Kurama through the still existing seal. Kurama nodded her head. "Alright. I'll go to a flank and make sure it doesn't escape. Would you like for me to set up a barrier?" she asked back with telepathy, making sure not to make a sound on the slim chance the cat would hear them. Naruto shook his head. "Nope, I would like to set up the barrier myself as yours aren't nearly as effective," he said with an evil grin on his face as he rubbed his hands together. Kurama pulled herself out of his arms and grinned at him. "By effective, you mean destructive, and that's why I'll be the one to set up the barrier. We need the cat alive," she said cheerfully in his head as she sent him a wink. Naruto pouted as he crossed his arms over his chest. "That's no fair," he mumbled telepathically. Kurama giggled silently as she leaned forward and kissed Naruto on his lips. Once they broke the kiss, she waved and disappeared. Naruto smiled to himself. "Damn, I love that girl, so crafty and sneaky," he fondly thought to himself before he too disappeared. He appeared on a branch just above his target, who seemed to be taking a nap on the forest ground. Naruto noticed the use of chakra and realized that Kurama was done with the barrier setup. He silently landed behind the cat, but it seemed as if the cat was capable of sensing his chakra, which he didn't mask since he never thought a cat could sense chakra. The cat jumped to its feet before starting to run away, Naruto hot on its tail. Naruto wasn't going anything near his full speed, he was simply matching the cat's speed and waiting for it to hit the barrier. Finally, a few seconds later, the cat hit something invisible and bounced backwards, straight into Naruto's waiting open hands. Once the cat realized that it was in Naruto's hands, it started to scratch at his face, though much to its confusion, its claws were passing right through Naruto's face, and his eyes were glowing red with a spiral-like pattern in it. Suddenly, the cat felt rather sleepy, and it fell asleep in Naruto's hands. Kurama appeared right next to Naruto and patted the little cat on its head. "Good job, Kura-chan. Though you were too merciful with that rubber barrier, not even a solid wall," he said, pouting at the lack of destruction and damage. Kurama laughed. I know, but look at this little one, isn't it cute?" she asked rhetorically as the two watched the cat enjoy its genjutsu-induced sleep. Naruto raised an eyebrow. "You want a pet?" he asked curiously. Kurama sighed dreamily. "Yap. A little cute fox would fit us perfectly," she said before she scowled. "Though I don't want to simply summon one of the members of the demon fox summoning clan, they aren't cute at all, simply strong and sadistic," she said as she shivered and shook her head. Naruto raised an eyebrow. "Sadistic? But you are the opposite of it, you usually like some rough play at night, he said teasingly. Kurama slightly blushed. That wasn't what I was talking about. The last one that tried to make a demon fox into a pet got so many pranks on him and in general, simply lived his life in the most painful way possible, she explained as she looked at Naruto with puppy dog eyes. So can we get a wild fox as a pet? She asked hopefully. Naruto simply laughed as he kissed her. Sure, if that's what you want. When we get missions outside of the village, I'll keep an eye out for nearby foxes. He said, and Kurama squealed in happiness. She kissed his lips. Thank you, Narukoi. I think we should drop that cat off at the Hokage's office and then go home so I can thank you properly. She said as she licked his neck. Naruto shivered. If that's it, then what are you waiting for? Grab hold and let's get going. Naruto said, grinning from ear to ear. Kurama nodded as she grabbed hold of Naruto's arm. The two disappeared in a swirl of leaves, not using the flying Raijin or Naruto's Kamui, so they could keep it a secret from everyone but the Hokage for a little more. The two appeared outside of the Hokage tower and walked in. They walked for a few seconds before simply entering the Hokage's office. I'm back with the cat you asked for, Aji-san. Naruto shouted as the two entered. Hiruzen smiled. Good. Because you were back in exactly 15 minutes, I officially declare you two as the holders of the record for capturing Tora, the fastest in history. He said. Naruto raised an eyebrow. What do you mean record? You mean the cat escaped more than once? He asked. Hiruzen chuckled. Yeah, Tora here is actually a ninja cat. She intentionally release it into the wild and make genin teams have to use teamwork in order to capture it. The record before you was 3 hours, he said. Naruto nodded. That explains how it was able to sense my chakra well, I don't really care. We're going home, Kuro-chan has promised me something and you'd better believe I'm gonna hold her to it. He said, grinning as he grabbed Kurama in his hands and the two disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Hiruzen flew into the wall behind him with a nosebleed as he imagined Kurama's quite attractive bod playing with Naruto. The Anbu guards laughed at the Hokage from the shadows as they waited for him to recover. Time skip. A month later, it was around 10 AM and both Naruto and Kurama were making their way towards the Hokage's office for their daily missions. In the past months, Naruto and Kurama went to the Hokage every morning, sending 50 clones of each to do D-rank missions and taking a C-rank mission for them both. They would usually take a few hours to get to where the mission was, most of the time a neighboring village in Hai no Kuni, Fire Country, and a few more hours to deal with whatever they were asked to do in said village. The two quickly became famous among the clients of Konoha as the best team of genin which were currently active as they were strong, had useful jutsu with Naruto's space-time jutsu and other things, and they were solving everything they were required to in mere moments before putting their plans into actions. The two were actually specifically requested sometimes by clients who liked them because of their nice personalities, great skills and amazing seriousness once it was needed. The two were now going to the Hokage's tower to give their report for yesterday's mission, which Naruto held in his hand, and get a new mission for the day. The two entered the Hokage tower before kicking the door to the Hokage's office open and walking in. But more Naruto's shout was stopped halfway through the sentence as he noticed the Hokage looking worriedly at a piece of paper while Iruka sat next to him and curiously looked at the Hokage. Hiruzen sighed in relief as he saw Naruto. Great timing, Naruto-kun, I have an important mission for you too. I need you two to take it very seriously and get going as soon as you can. He said, and Naruto nodded, his serious face active. Kurama stood next to him with equal seriousness on her face as she listened to the Hokage. I got a message from Kakashi's summoning dog saying that he and his team have encountered 2 Chunin-level missing nins in the beginning of their first C-rank mission and that he requests backup because he fears that the next one will be at least Jonin level. I want you two to go assist him. As you might know, Naruto-kun. As Kakashi's student, you'd know that he's easily better than a normal Jonin, but he has 3 genin and a civilian to protect while he fights, so I'm worried. Hiruzen explained. Naruto nodded his head sharply. I understand. We will depart at once. See you later. He said calmly. He and Kurama walked forward and took the mission scroll from the Hokage. He grabbed hold of Kurama's hand and they disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Lucky for them, they came with their things packed in storage scrolls already, so they didn't have to go back home before departing. The two appeared in front of the main gate of Konoha. Kitetsu, Izumo, we're leaving on another mission. Here's the scroll. Naruto said as he appeared in front of the guard's booth. Kitetsu had long, spiky black hair and dark eyes. He has a strip of bandage running across the bridge of his nose and a light-colored marking on his chin. He wears the standard attire of a Konoha shinobi, complete with a forehead protector and a flak jacket. Izumo has brown hair and dark eyes. His hair is combed down and always covers his right eye. He wears his forehead protector like a bandana, along with the standard Konoha shinobi outfit, which goes all the way up to his chin. Izumo took the scroll from Naruto, and after reading it, he rolled it up and gave it back to Naruto. You can go now, he said. Naruto nodded before he and Kurama disappeared. They jumped through the trees for a little while before Naruto stopped. Kurama came to a halt right next to him. "What's up?" she asked. Naruto pointed forward to where something they were searching for was. It was a small orange fox with a single orange tail that ended in a black tip. Its ears were orange with the tip also being black. The fox was standing on 3 legs as its front right paw was lifted off the ground. It slowly backed away as it whimpered at the sight of 3 massive bears towering over it. Kurama went to jump in front of it, but Naruto grabbed her shoulder, stopping her. "We don't have time for this. Those are only bears, so we can leave a clone each to get us that fox. As strong as we might be, I don't want to take the risk of sending my clones to deal with Jonin level ninja," he explained before a clone puffed into existence right next to him. Kurama nodded her head at Naruto's deduction, as it made more sense to send clones to deal with 3 bears over an A-rank shinobi. The clone of her appeared right next to her as well, and the 2 clones jumped towards the small fox together. "Let's get going," Naruto said seriously as they continued to jump from branch to branch towards Kakashi's scent. It didn't take the 2 long to get there, and they couldn't have been happier to have left their clones to deal with the bears. They saw a clearing, and in it, a man was holding Kakashi inside of a water bubble while his clones, all of which were wielding one of the 7 swords of the mist, the Kubikirabacho, Executioner's Blade, were running towards where Sasuke and Sai were laying on the ground, unconscious and with a shitload of scratches and slash wounds on them. Sakura was standing in front of an old man, a kunai in her shaking hands as she looked in horror at the unconscious form of her love. The man holding Kakashi stood at the height of 6'0" and was noticeably a muscular man with light grayish skin, short spiky black hair, dark brown eyes, and very small borderline non-existent eyebrows. He was wearing bandages like a mask over the bottom half of his face. He wore his forehead protector with a scratched out symbol of Kurigakure sideways on his head. He was seen shirtless, with his chest only covered by a belt to which he attached his Kubikirabacho, wearing baggy pants with a striped pattern typical of Kurigakure and mimetic wrist warmers, extending up to his elbows, with matching leg warmers. The old man behind Sakura was a gray-haired, bespectacled man with a large beard and dark eyes. He wore a sleeveless V-neck shirt with an obi, pants and a pair of sandals. He also carried a towel around his neck and wore a pointed hat on his head. Naruto glanced towards Kurama. "That is Abusa Mamachi, he is an A-rank missing nin from Kiri. He is the wielder of the Kubikirabacho and has great skills in Kenjutsu. However, he isn't alone. There's someone waiting in the trees. I'll take Zabuza, you just take care of the other one," Naruto said. Kurama nodded, accepting Naruto's plan. Zabuza's clones were just in front of Sasuke and Sai, their swords slashing downwards. Naruto appeared in front of the 2, each hand holding one of his swords and blocking the clones' massive swords. The clones looked in absolute shock as some kid was blocking them both at the same time, using one hand for each of them. Naruto suddenly released his pressure over the swords before jumping and throwing a spin kick that made both clones disperse into water along with their swords. Naruto looked down at his long black pants. "Man, now my pants are soaked," he whined to himself as he channeled fire nature chakra into his pants, drying them. He then leveled a glare at Zabuza. Naruto held a single hand seal with one hand and held the other up. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning materialized in his hand. He threw it towards Zabuza's hand, the one holding the water prison, with extreme precision and speed. Only Zabuza's years of experience allowed his reflexes to take his hand back, avoiding the attack and releasing Kakashi at the same time. Kakashi was dropped onto the water where he used chakra to kneel on top of the surface while panting heavily. Zabuza jumped back, grunting as he glared at the new team that joined the fight. "You okay, Iro Anayasan?" Naruto asked, using his nickname for Kakashi, not caring that the situation was serious. Kakashi looked at him for a second before he chuckled lightly. "Don't worry about me, I'll be fine. You just kick his ass," he said tiredly. "This isn't good, he has been using his Sharingan too much. He will not be able to operate well in the next few days," Naruto thought to himself. Suddenly, Kurama appeared next to Naruto, while another teen appeared next to Zabuza. His outfit consisted of the standard Kurigakure pinstriped outfit which stopped at his knees. Over this he wore a green haori with white trimmings, and around his waist, a brown sash with a fringe trail wrapped around his waist twice. He also wore light brown platoon sandals with straps in the same color as his kimono and nail polish on his fingernails and toenails in matching blue-green color. His long hair was gathered in a white bun holder, while 2 locks of his hair fell loose framing his face, bound with metal hair cuffs at the ends. He also wore a black forehead protector with the Kurigakure symbol upon it. He also wore the standard hunter nin mask of Kurigakure. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the newcomer. "Is that the one which was hiding?" he asked towards Kurama. She nodded her head. "Yes. I found him hiding in one of the treetops," she responded. Naruto nodded as he turned his head to glare at Zabuza. "Let's see what the supposed demon of the mist can do against a real demon," he said as he dashed forward. The masked teen dashed in his path only to be punched in the chest by Kurama, who appeared in front of him and sent him into a nearby tree. Zabuza frowned. "Haku, try to handle the woman, I'll deal with the brat quickly and come help you," he said as he pulled the Kubikirabacho off his back and clashed it against Naruto's two blades, surprisingly being pushed back. Naruto backflipped away as he held his swords in an X formation. Two-sword style. X/. Naruto said as he slashed his swords outwards, creating a shockwave which clashed against Zabuza's sword and would have cut it in half had he not jumped away. Once Zabuza's sword was gone and the slash was uncontested, it went on to slash through 15 of the nearby trees before disappearing into thin air. Naruto grinned. "I'm impressed you dodged that. That should have cut cleanly through you," he said as he held his swords in a backwards grip. He held his hands in front of his face with the tips of the swords aiming towards Zabuza. Naruto thrust the swords forward and a straight shockwave tore through the ground. Two-sword style. Rushing bull's horns. Naruto shouted as the attack shot at Zabuza with impossible speeds. Zabuza jumped to the right, but it was a little too late. His left shoulder was cut, luckily for him, not too deeply so he was still able to battle, but he was still hurt. Naruto watched as Zabuza panted lightly before running forward. Zabuza made a downward slash that was supposed to cut Naruto in half. However, Naruto sheathed one of his blades before starting to spin his remaining one with both hands. One-sword style. Turtle's shell. Naruto shouted as Zabuza hit the spinning blade and he was pushed back. Naruto grinned as he noticed an explosion of fire just next to them. Suddenly, Kurama appeared again next to Naruto, just as Haku appeared next to Zabuza, panting heavily, burn marks all over his clothes, and his mask cracked. "Kura-chan, do you mind giving me your sword? I would like to test it out against this one," Naruto said, grinning. Kurama grinned back as she pulled her sword from her sheath. Naruto placed the sword he had in his hands in his mouth, his teeth holding the hilt. He took Kurama's sword, holding it in his right hand before taking his second sword, holding it in his left. He grinned maniacally as he crossed his arms over his chest, the blades of the swords held at the sides of his face. Kurama sat down on the ground next to Naruto as she grinned excitedly. "Haku-chan, you'd probably want to sit down and enjoy the show, I promise I won't attack," Kurama said, enjoying the annoyed growl coming from the boy at the nickname. The boy reluctantly sat down and curiously looked at Naruto. Naruto suddenly disappeared. He appeared behind Zabuza, his swords held out to his sides in an open manner as he slid both of his swords into his sheath and held Kurama's sword in his right hand. Three-sword style. Fox's claw. Naruto said calmly as his swords clicked in their sheath and Zabuza fell forward on his face, blood running out of his slashed open side. Sasuke, Sakura, Sai, Tazuna and even Kakashi were staring at Naruto in shock. However, even though Haku was surprised, even more than the others, he knew that with Zabuza down, there was no chance of winning and that he needed to treat Zabuza's wounds. Haku quickly grabbed hold of Zabuza's shoulder before disappearing in a swirl of water. Naruto shrugged as he saw them leaving. "They'll come back eventually, we might as well let them recover so I could have another decent fight," he said to himself as he walked towards Kurama. She was looking at him with hearts in her eyes. She squealed as he came closer. She quickly jumped on top of him, her body pressed into his as they kissed. "You're so awesome. So much blood, so much pain and so much destruction with only your swords. It's so fun seeing my strong man fighting. So arousing too," she said, whispering the last part into his ear. Naruto laughed as he wrapped his own arms around her waist and kissed her lips. "Don't sell yourself short either. I saw that explosion of fire and I saw how that guy looked, you were just as awesome," he shouted back, excitement in his voice as well. Kakashi suddenly fell forward on the ground, making a loud thud sound. Naruto walked over to him and flipped him over with his leg to see Kakashi snoring with his eyes closed. Naruto leaned down and covered Kakashi's Sharingan eye with the headband before creating a clone to carry Kakashi. He then turned his head to where the rest of Team 7 and their client were. "Oi. Old man, take us to your house. This guy here needs some rest," he said, pointing at Kakashi. The man quickly jumped to his feet. "Sure, follow me." Just as he said that, another pair of Naruto and Kurama appeared in front of the first one, the second Naruto having a fox on top of his head. The first Naruto grinned as he held his hand out and in it, his counterpart placed the small fox. Naruto placed it on his head before both the second Naruto and the second Kurama disappeared in a puff of smoke. Naruto turned to Kurama and they exchanged looks as they got the memories of what happened before they both shrugged and started walking after the old man, Naruto's clone carrying Kakashi with him. Flashback. After Naruto and Kurama left the clones, the two clones appeared in front of the bears, 10 tails coming out of Naruto's backbone and 9 out of Kurama's. The two had orange fox ears and were practically glowing with the strong aura of their chakra. As the chakra was demonic fox chakra, it felt comforting to the small fox, but menacing to the bears who decided that the little fox wouldn't be worth the effort of fighting those two demons and ran away. Naruto and Kurama turned around and crouched in front of the little fox. It ran over to them as best it could with its hurt front right leg. Naruto reached a hand out to it, and after the fox came close enough to Naruto's hand, his hand glowed green and he started to heal the small fox. Apparently, with the wood release came Hashirama's great chakra control, as well as his talent for medical ninjutsu, so Naruto simply added that to the things he needed to master in his training. He was already about as good as his grandmother, but he had a lot more training to do before he was on Hashirama's level. The fox was quickly healed up and it licked Naruto's hand. "Do you have a family, little one?" Naruto asked. The small fox shook its head sadly. "No, I never had any family. I was simply wandering the forest for the past week and that's as far back as I can remember," the fox said, and because the two were half foxes, they easily understood. Naruto looked at Kurama to see her giving him puppy dog eyes and he chuckled slightly. "If that's so, we have an offer for you. We would like to take you as our daughter. What do you say? Wanna be the daughter of the strongest of the demon foxes?" he asked with a smile. Apparently, when he was using the diagnosis Judas to check how badly she was damaged, he found out her gender as well. The small fox looked at Naruto and then at Kurama before looking at their number of tails. "Are you sure it will be okay? After all, you have 9 tails, and you have an impossible 10 tails, while I only have 1," she asked sadly. Naruto waved her off. "Don't worry about it. You'll grow, and you might even grow enough to unlock your 5th tail and with it, your human form just like us. With the right teaching, you can do anything, and who is better to teach you than the leader of the demon fox summoning clan and her mate?" he asked as he extended his hands in front of her once again. The fox got teary-eyed as she ran into Naruto's hands and nuzzled them affectionately. Kurama brought her hand over the little fox's head and patted her. "Don't worry, girl, we'll take good care of you," she said happily. End of flashback. Naruto smiled as he heard the light snores of his sleeping adopted daughter from on top of his head. They quickly made it to a house where the old man knocked on the door. "It's me. I'm back," the man shouted to whoever was inside. The door suddenly opened to show a young woman standing there. She had long blue-colored hair and black eyes. She wore a short-sleeved pink shirt with the end of the sleeves and the collar being red in color. She also wore a long blue skirt. Once she realized who was standing in front of her, she ran forward and hugged the old man. "Tusan. You're back," she said. The man rubbed her back. "Yeah, of course I'm back. It is all thanks to those super awesome ninjas, especially the blonde brat and the Redeed," he said gratefully. The woman separated herself from her father and bowed to the shinobi. "You have my gratitude for escorting my father here safely. My name is Tsunami and I am Tezuna's daughter," she said. Before the members of Team 7 could speak, Naruto stepped forward. He smiled and while pulling Kurama into his chest with one hand, he held his other hand out to her. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki and she is my wife, Kurama Uzumaki. Those 3 are Sasuke, Sakura and Sai," he said as he gestured to the person he was introducing. Tsunami nodded. "It's nice to meet you," she said. Naruto nodded back, acknowledging her. "Is there a place where we can allow that guy to rest? He is Kakashi Haddock, by the way. He is the Jonin sensei of the other 3, he asked, pointing with his thumb over his shoulder to where his clone was carrying Kakashi. She nodded her head and stepped out of the doorway. "Of course, you are all welcome in our house. I will show you to your rooms. We have 2 rooms available, so I believe you should split up into girls and guys," she said as they entered. Naruto quickly shook his head. "That would be unnecessary and unwise. With all of my respect for Kuro-chan's patience, Sakura will not leave that room alive. I suggest myself, Kuro-chan and Kakashi in one room and the others in the second room. I say it because I am the one most knowledgeable in medical ninjutsu, meaning I should be with Kakashi and Kuro-chan stays with me," he said. Tsunami shrugged as she turned to Sakura. "Are you alright with sharing a room with them?" she asked. Sakura nodded. "It's fine, as a team, we are used to it," she said, trying to speak normally, but her voice still being too loud for normal conversation, waking up the fox on Naruto's shoulder and making all 3 foxes cringe at the pain in their sensitive ears. Tsunami nodded as she took the group up a set of stairs where there were 3 rooms. She pointed to the one on the right and the one on the left. "Those are your rooms. The room in front is my son's room," she said. The group walked into their rooms and closed the doors after them. Naruto laid Kakashi on the couch present in the room before his hand started to go over Kakashi's body, glowing a light green. A few moments later, Kakashi started to wake up. "Thanks, Nai-chan," he said as he sat up. Naruto waved him off. "Don't mention it, though you'd better start training your team more seriously. Zabuza is gonna come back in a week or 2 and he will target them as he knows that normally, he can't defeat me," Naruto said. Even though he was holding back so much against Zabuza, if he somehow got his hands on hostages, it would not end well. Kakashi nodded his head. "Yeah, you're right. I'll teach them tree climbing tomorrow, I need to rest for today," he said as he stretched his hands and laid back down. Naruto nodded. Alright. We'll call you when dinner's ready. He said as he grabbed Kurama's hand and they left the room, going down the set of stairs to where Tsunami was making dinner in the kitchen. Would you like help, Tsunami-san? Naruto asked as he and Kurama entered the kitchen. She turned to look at him with a curious eyebrow raise. You know how to cook? She asked curiously. Naruto chuckled. Of course I do. I mean, I've never had any parents to cook me anything, he said cheerfully as he shrugged his shoulders. It took him quite a while to get over his childhood, but with Kurama's help, it wasn't too hard for him to simply let go. Tsunami was taken aback by the cheerful way he said it. Are you alright? She asked in slight concern. Naruto chuckled lightly. Yeah, I'm fine. It's just that my parents died just a few hours after I was born. After that, I wasn't very well liked in my village for something which I didn't know at the time. It was only when I met Kurama-chan when I finally realized how hard my life could be if I kept complaining about what is wrong with my life and about how unfair it was, so I had to learn to let go and move on. That's why I can talk with such nonchalance about my childhood. He explained. Tsunami sadly nodded. Anyways, now that I'm done with the depressing things, let's get started on dinner. Naruto said cheerfully. Time skip. 40 minutes later, Naruto and Tsunami were just finishing with dinner and so, Naruto decided that they should go call the residents of the house. Naruto went up to his room and woke Kakashi up before calling Sasuke, Sakura and Sai. Meanwhile, Tsunami went to call her son and her father to come eat. Finally, everyone sat down next to the table and looked at the food with watering mouths. Naruto and Tsunami had made fish, rice, steamed vegetables and Naruto even made some rice balls. Everyone picked whatever they wanted and placed it on their plates before saying a quick itadakimasu and starting to eat. Naruto and Kurama, as usual, shared a single plate and fed each other the food, enjoying Naruto's food as well as each other's company like always. It was around 5 minutes later that they were all interrupted. Tsunami's son, Inari, as she introduced him, slammed his hands on the table, making Sakura and Tsunami jump, while Naruto and Kurama glared at him for interrupting their fun time. Why do you even try? Gato will kill you all. Escape this doomed country while you can. He said dramatically. Naruto grinned as he turned his head to look at Sasuke. He reminds me a lot of you, Sasuke. Breeding, check. Dramatic, check. Depressed, check. I think we found your tween. Naruto said, laughing. Kurama giggled and Kakashi snickered as Sasuke glared at Naruto. Inari slammed his hands on the table again, regaining their attention. There's no one in the world strong enough to defeat Gato. You should just leave. He shouted. Naruto raised an eyebrow. But Gato is only a tyrant, he hired an A-ranked missing nin and some thugs, it shouldn't be a problem for 3 trained shinobi such as myself, Iro Iniasen and Kura-chan. He said, still smiling. Inari scowled. It's not about strength. You people live in a big rich village. You have no idea what pain and suffering is. He shouted. Tsunami gasped next to them, having heard the brief story which Naruto told her. Naruto glared at him. Do you have any idea who you are talking to? He asked, his single open blue eye glowing. Inari slightly cowered in fear. You still have family to take care of you, you are living in a big house and you have food on your table every day. Do you know how it feels to grow up without parents because they died just a few hours after you were born? Do you know how it feels to have no friends and be hated by the people of your own village because of something you could never control? Do you know how it feels to be tortured for a whole week straight just because some guy got drunk and decided that he felt like it? You don't know how it feels and I wish you never will. Those were horrible things that happened to me in my childhood. For example, the scar on my eye. I was 5 years old at the time and I was chased down by a few Chunin level ninja of our very own village, along with a few severances. I was able to escape because my bloodline activated in time, but I was left with this scar over my eye as a reminder for a promise I made that same day. I made a promise that I would get stronger in order to achieve my dream. That was also when I realized something. Do you know what it was? Naruto explained his life story with a sugar coating to it, but he couldn't describe being burned alive to some 10-year-old kid. Inari slowly shook his head and Naruto smiled. I realized that I shouldn't be ashamed of being weak. However, I should be ashamed for staying weak. And so, that's what I did. I trained and trained and trained some more. And now, there's no one in the world that could defeat me. He shouted, pumping his fist into the air, making Kurama giggle slightly as she rubbed his back and kissed his cheek. Naruto then pointed at Inari. So that's it, kid. Always remember. There's no reason to be ashamed of being weak. The shame is in staying weak. Please tell me that someone knows where this is from. He said with a grin as he picked some more food in his chopsticks and fed it to Kurama, getting the food from her chopsticks in return. Kurama would have tried to apologize for the way his early life was because of her, but Naruto simply shrugged her off and told her that he loved her too much to hold it against her the last time she tried, so she simply gave up on it. Chapter 3. The salvation of a country. The morning sun was shining brightly in the sky of Wave Country. The sun rays went down from the sun and through the windows of houses. One ray in particular went through a window and straight into the eyes of a curtained teen. Naruto groaned as the sun hit him right in the eyes. He was cuddled together with his wife as her head rested on his chest. They shared a single futon as they wanted to stay as close as possible to each other. Naruto clutched his arms around the sleeping form of his wife as he slept, unconsciously turning them to the side to try and avoid the sunlight. He failed in avoiding the sunlight as his face was still assaulted by the blinding light of the sun. But a groan, his eyes slowly opened. He smiled as he looked at his wife's sleeping face as it rested on his naked chest. Her crimson hair was scattered all around his chest and down his stomach. Surrounded by blinding light, she almost looked like she was glowing. Naruto leaned down and kissed her forehead, rubbing her back to slowly wake her up. "Not now, just 5 more minutes," Kurama mumbled in her sleep. Naruto chuckled silently as he complied with her request. He waited 5 minutes before he leaned down again and kissed her lips gently. "No, oh, I wanna stay cuddled for just a little longer," she whined as she opened her eyes and looked up at Naruto. Naruto smirked at her. "We can continue cuddling in the shower if you want. Hiriro and Iasen can wake up any moment," he whispered to her. Kurama's eyes light up. "Alright, let's go," she said excitedly. Naruto grinned as he got out from under the blanket. He took one scroll with a set of clothes for each of them before he and his wife went to the shower. Both of them were just wearing their underwear as they couldn't sleep naked with Kakashi around. The two just made their way into the shower as Kakashi started to stir. Naruto was lucky he remembered to place a privacy seal in the shower, otherwise Kakashi would have died from the loss of blood. The two came back out fully dressed after half an hour and greeted Kakashi before walking down to the kitchen. "Good morning, Tsunami-san, would you like any help with breakfast?" Naruto asked politely as he walked into the kitchen with Kurama wrapped around his right hand. She mostly was leaning on him to hide her limp as she was glowing with the after effect of her morning love with her husband. Tsunami smiled at the two. "Good morning you two, you had a good night?" she asked as she continued working on breakfast and motioned for Naruto to join her. Kurama went to sit on a chair next to the counter of the kitchen. "I slept just fine. My pillow is always next to me so I don't have anything to worry about," she said happily. Naruto just smiled at her as he pulled a pan out of one of the drawers. "I slept fine as well. I was a little cold, but Kura-chan warmed me up very well," he said happily as he waited for the pan to warm up. Tsunami looked at the two with stars in her eyes as she sighed. "I wish I had the kind of love you two have to be young and in love," she sighed dreamily. Naruto smiled at her. "That might be. However, you have a child to take care of and love now. I always wanted a big family and I hope that eventually I could have one with Kura-chan," he said. Tsunami squealed as she went into fangirl mode at the love between Naruto and Kurama. Kurama meanwhile was in a world of her own. Kids with Narukoi. That would be a dream come true, though that'll have to wait until he grows up at least a little, she thought to herself as she blushed and giggled inwardly. The breakfast was ready just 30 minutes after and everyone sat at the table. As usual, Naruto and Kurama ignored everything around them and had Kurama sit in Naruto's lap as they fed each other the tasty food. Kakashi cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. "Alright. After breakfast, we will be splitting up into 3 groups. One group will come with me to the forest to train. One will go to guard Tazuna at the bridge and the last group will stay here to guard Tsunami-san and Inari-san." Kakashi started. "I'll leave my clones to guard Tsunami-san and Inari-san. Myself and Kura-chan will guard Tazuna at the bridge. You can take your team to train, they needed a hell of a lot more than we do," he said. Kakashi silently nodded, agreeing with Naruto's plan of action. However, the plan didn't sit well with 2 people at the table. Sasuke slammed his hands on the table. "What makes you think that you're better than us?" he asked in outrage. "Yeah. Sasuke-kun is the best. There is no one stronger than him," Sakura shouted. Naruto rolled his eyes. "Sasuke, stop pouting. I have proven over and over again that I am better than you. First at the graduation exam and a second time when I saved your ass from Zabuza before defeating him. Even if you would even admit it, we are leagues apart, not just one, and there's nothing you can do about it," he said, glaring at the Uchiha before turning his glare to the pink megaphone. He didn't speak, allowing his wife to speak in his place. "And you, Sakura, are even worse than he is. Sasuke might be arrogant, but he has at least a little bite to him. You didn't even say that you are good, you simply are saying that Sasuke is good. You are living in a shinobi world. This world is much harsher than you could ever imagine. Your precious Uchiha princess won't be able to save you every time you are in danger even if he wanted to, something which he clearly doesn't," she said, and Naruto nodded, confirming that it was what he thought as well. Kakashi clapped his hands. "Settle down everyone," he said before looking at Sasuke and Sakura. "You should take what they said to heart. Both Naruto and Kurama are leagues above you. Actually, as the one who trained Naruto and occasionally helped Kurama train, I can say that you two are not even on the same scale as them. Heck, even I'm not there. I never saw either of them fighting seriously, but I can tell you right now. With only what I've seen, which is half-serious taijutsu and kinjutsu fights as well as Naruto's fuinjutsu, and what I've been told about their special abilities and bloodlines, the two might as well fight in their sleep as they will win anyways. He said seriously. Naruto released some of his chakra, making the air in the room feel a lot heavier. That's enough, Kakashi. There is no need to reveal our abilities. You can never know who is listening. He said, motioning with his eyes towards Sai. Kakashi nodded his head as Naruto's chakra pressure dropped. Naruto stood up as he and Kurama finished their food. The two stood at the doorway. We'll be waiting outside for when you finish, Tazuna-san. Naruto said as the two walked out, closing the door after them. A week later, everyone stood together on the bridge. The only ones missing from the group which was staying at Tazuna's house were Tsunami and Inari, who were back home with 20 Naruto clones guarding them, along with Naruto and Kurama's new pet fox, which was training, trying to unlock her inner demon fox so she could start working with demonic chakra. One of Naruto's clones was helping her train and encouraging her to do better, giving her motivation when she needed, and giving her an example of how demonic fox chakra felt. After the morning a week ago, everyone continued with Naruto's plan for the whole week, Naruto even using his clones to help Tazuna build the bridge. Yesterday, Team 7 were finally able to master tree climbing, and the group had decided to go help guard the bridge. As they were looking around for any threats, a thick mist slowly materialized around them. Here he comes, everyone stays back, and Nai-san, you are the last line of defense. Zabuza will target your students because he knows that he cannot defeat me normally. If he slips past us, get ready to defend them. Kura-chan, you're with me. You take on his student. Just knock him out, and no matter what, no killing either one of them, I need them alive. Naruto ordered as he and Kurama dashed forward towards where he sensed Zabuza and his student. Sasuke seethed his teeth in anger as he was forced into a circle around Tazuna, along with his teammates and sensei. Naruto and Kurama entered a little space on the bridge with Zabuza and his student. There wasn't any mist. Naruto sent a smile towards his two enemies. Hello Zabuza, how about we avoid fighting? I believe we both know that you are incapable of defeating me. How about we talk, and if you want, I can help you kill Geto if you are only after money, he suggested. Zabuza narrowed his eyes. What's the catch? He asked. Naruto smiled. I have something I wish to discuss with you. I understand if you do not trust me, but please, try to understand that there's a good chance that we are both on the same side. He explained. Zabuza was slightly taken aback. Alright, talk. If I see that you truly have something which might interest me, I will turn to your side. However, you need to understand that if I turn on Geto now, my reputation is destroyed. If I don't think what you have to offer is worth it, we will have to battle. He explained. Naruto smiled. Good, he said as he pulled a scroll out of his pocket. You see, before myself and my wife here left Konoha to provide backup to Kakashi's team, the Hokage asked me. Flashback. Just before Naruto and Kurama left the Hokage's office. Naruto-kun, before you go, I have a secondary mission for you too. Hiruzen said as Naruto and Kurama started walking towards the exit of his office. Naruto and Kurama turned around to see what Hiruzen had for the two of them. Hiruzen pulled a scroll out of a drawer and threw it to Naruto. Since the last two missing nins which Kakashi encountered were former members of Kurigakure and currently are members of the rebellion, I assume that the next missing nin will be as well. As you know, Konoha always loved bloodlines, and as a person who has 3 of them, I'm sure you would hate to see whole bloodlines destroyed. Because of that, I have decided that after the Chunin exams, after you both surely will advance in rank to elite Chunin if not straight up Jonin, I will send you both to help in Kiri's civil war. I'm sure that you two are interested in helping, and I would like to help, so I'm sending them the 2 strongest shinobi of Konohagakure. Your mission is to explain that to whoever will appear next, as long as whoever it is belongs to the rebel side of Kurigakure, and give them this scroll which they would need to pass on to whoever is in charge there. Hiruzen explained. Naruto and Kurama looked at each other before they both grinned. Thanks, Aji-san, Hiruzen-san. They both said at the same time. Naruto grinned maniacally as he looked at his hands, lightning crackling in one of his hands as the other had fire in it, his Mangekyo Sharingan activated, and both wood tentacles and golden chains sprouted out of the ground. Naruto's 10 tails each went into his wrist seals and took out Hiraishin Kunes. Naruto was so excited to go to war. He wanted to try out his power in a place where he could run wild. He was just lucky Iruka left the room and he was left with Hiruzen and Kurama alone, otherwise he would have had quite a bit to explain. Kurama placed her hand on his shoulder as she leaned over his side and kissed him. Come on, Narukoi. You can get excited for war later. We need to go save your perverted sensei before he dies. You are lucky you didn't unleash your killing intent or your chakra by accident, because that alone could kill the old man. She said, scolding him playfully. Naruto pouted as the lightning and fire in his hands went out. His tails returned the kunai into his wrist seals before disappearing. His Sharingan deactivated and the wood tentacles went back into the floor. The chains disappeared as the broken wooden floor repaired itself. "Fine, let's go," he said in depression. Kurama grinned pervertedly. "Don't be so down, I think I found a different way you can use those wooden tentacles until we get to war," she said. Naruto looked up at her and after seeing the perverted grin on her face, he understood what she meant. He grinned himself as he leered at her, ignoring the way Hiruzen flew into the wall with a nosebleed. The two ran out of the door, waving to Hiruzen who was seeing stars on the floor with a trail of blood coming out of his nose. End of flashback. Naruto explained to Zabuza how Hiruzen said that the leaf loves bloodlines and so, they couldn't stand for their annihilation. Zabuza and his student were both shocked to hear that Naruto had 3 different bloodlines, yet he defeated Zabuza without using any of them. Zabuza nodded his head. "I understand what you are saying. I will deliver the note to our leader, Mate Terumi. However, I will do so only after I am done with my mission. I am the person who provides the most for the rebel side of Kurigakure, and I cannot have my reputation damaged by turning on the person who hired me. If by any chance Geto will betray us, I shall join your side and help you defeat Geto," he said. Naruto smiled and nodded. "I understand. I will do my best not to kill you during our battle," he said cheerfully. Kurama giggled as she looked at the masked form of her former opponent. "Well, I guess I'll do the same with you, Haku-chan," she said, only to be cut off by Naruto. "No, you will not. We fight together to take care of both of them. My techniques are way too deadly for a battle which I am not supposed to end with my opponent's death. You are softer and your techniques are less destructive, and so, I will immobilize them and you knock them out," Naruto ordered. Kurama nodded her head. "I guess you're right, you are too destructive. Though that's what I like about you, so I guess it's a good thing," she said as she planted a kiss on his lips, totally ignoring the fact that they were in the middle of a serious fight. Naruto sweat dropped before shrugging and kissing her back. The two were snapped out of their loving moment when they sensed a massive water dragon surrounded by countless water needles coming towards them. The two growled together as Kurama held her hand in the horse hand seal and brought it to her mouth. "Fire style. Great fire annihilation," she shouted as a massive wall of fire shot out of her mouth, making its way towards the water attacks. Naruto watched the fire completely evaporate the water and sighed. "Kuri-chan, I get that you're upset, but we need them alive, otherwise, we won't be able to go to the war," he said comfortingly as he pecked her lips. Kurama pouted. "I know, but it's not my fault that they interrupted my happy moment with my love," she huffed. Naruto shook his head as he stomped a bridge and a massive wall of water rose from under the bridge, putting out the flames and evaporating at the same time. Naruto smiled at Kurama as he grabbed her chin and kissed her pouting lips. "Don't worry, my love, I'll make sure that we have more moments like that one when we are out of fights. For now, let's take care of those two and go back home to see how our little kid is doing," he said. At the mention of their little fox girl, Kurama smiled and nodded as she turned to look at the shocked missing nins. She had grown very attached to the little fox in the past week and had become something of an overprotective mother to her. Though it was still clear that she loved Naruto more for some reason. Zabuza and Haku thought about Naruto and Kurama using those massive attacks to help their country win the civil war and couldn't help but smile truly. With power like that, and probably even more as they have not seen a single one of Naruto's bloodlines yet, they could easily turn the war around in their favor. As they thought about those things, a pair of golden chakra chains sprouted behind their backs. Zabuza was able to tackle Haku out of the way just in time to get away from the attack, only for the two of them to stare in shock at the chains, easily recognizing them. Zabuza pointed a shaking finger at Naruto. "One of your bloodlines is the Uzumaki clan's bloodline. Such a powerful bloodline, and it is only the first out of 3. He asked in shock. Naruto grinned. "Bingo. It comes from my mother's grandmother. To be honest, I might say that it is the weakest out of all of my bloodlines, even though I can do some pretty amazing things with the use of Fuinjutsu," he said, laughing as he watched Zabuza's expression. Suddenly, they saw someone rushing towards the two missing nins. Everyone watched in shock as Sasuke ran towards the two, a kunai in hand. "Of course you would not be able to win without me, I am the very best," Sasuke shouted as he ran towards the two missing nins. Naruto and Kurama watched as Zabuza took this opportunity and captured Sasuke, holding him with his own kunai against his neck. Naruto slapped his forehead as he looked at Sasuke. "You are such a moron, this is why I told you to stay back, I didn't want any of you to be taken hostage," Naruto said in annoyance. Zabuza laughed. "Yeah, that wasn't very smart of you, kid. The blonde brat was right in keeping you kids away from the fight, seeing as you would only get in his way like you just did," he said. Naruto sighed. "Whatever, I'll get him out, just knock him out once he's here so he won't do anything stupid," he said to Kurama before using the substitution jutsu to switch places with Sasuke. Kurama quickly knocked him out as she watched Naruto with a smirk. Zabuza laughed evilly. "Sorry brat, but this is your end." he said as he went to stab Naruto's neck. Naruto simply activated his Mangekyo Sharingan, making sure to put a small genjutsu over it as he didn't want his Sharingan being revealed so soon. He activated his Kamui and walked out of Zabuza's hold, allowing the kunai to pass right through him and for Zabuza to stab himself in the stomach. Naruto sighed as his Mangekyo deactivated. He made a clone and pointed at Zabuza. "Heal him up," he ordered as his clone crouched next to Zabuza. Naruto turned to the masked boy. "Stand down, Haku. You lost. Your master is injured and so, you are technically failing the mission and not abandoning it," he said and the masked boy nodded. Just then, they all sensed around 200 chakra signatures coming onto the bridge, the mist slowly disappearing. Once the mist was cleared, Tazuna and his protection ran over to the group of 3 conscious people, as well as Sasuke and Zabuza. Kakashi stood next to Naruto as Sakura kneeled next to Sasuke, her ear to his heart and her hand holding tightly onto his own. "So what happened?" Kakashi asked towards his little brother figure. Naruto sighed. "I spoke with Zabuza about what Aji-san wanted me to speak with him about and we came to an agreement that we would still fight as turning back now would destroy Zabuza's reputation. I can't tell you what we talked about as it is an S-rank secret, though I believe Aji-san will tell you when we get back. We agreed that if Geto betrays Zabuza, he joins us and we kill Geto before going to finish our deal, and if he doesn't appear, we said that we would speak after the fight. Your bright student decided that he was better than us and charged forward, getting himself taken as a hostage. I freed him, injuring Zabuza and knocking Sasuke out so he wouldn't get himself killed. Now that Geto did come to betray them, Haku will fight with us, and once Zabuza recovers with the healing of my clone, he will join us. Though you all should step back. I'll take care of this with Kuro-chan," he said as he stepped forward with Kurama to his right. Kakashi nodded as he took a step back and prepared to protect his team, client and new allies. A small army walked closer to everyone led by a single man. The man was Geto, according to the description of Tsunami and Tazuna. "Listen up, men. I want all of the men killed and the women brought to me. Whoever brings me that Riti gets a million yen bonus," Geto shouted to his thugs. Naruto growled, hearing him talking about his love in such a way. "Kuro-chan, please stay back. I would like to handle this one on my own," he said in a growl as his single open eye glowed. Kurama nodded as even she gulped. She knew that once Naruto got serious or angry, even she couldn't help to come close to being able to match his power. All she could do if that situation ever came, she could only try to calm him down. Naruto released his only tail's worth of normal chakra, causing a shockwave which knocked everyone but Kurama and Kakashi to the ground. The air pressure increased tenfold and it was very hard to breathe. Naruto grinned maniacally as he ran through hand seals. Once done, he took a deep breath. "Foxfire style. Great fire annihilation," he shouted as he spat a massive wall of light blue flames. Naruto clapped his hands together and closed his single eye. Naruto's flames seemed to be coming to life as they chased down each and every member of Geto's thug army, leaving no one but Geto alive. Naruto slowly walked towards Geto, the man cowering back in fear. Everyone watched in amazement at the strength of Naruto Uzumaki, even Kurama was impressed that he could pull that off with only a single tail of normal chakra. That foxfire style was very draining as it gave the ability to control the blue flames and not simply launch them. Usually it took demonic chakra to use it, and that's why most of the time only someone with demonic chakra could use it. Naruto stood in front of Geto, his grin still in place and his single eye staring into Geto's soul. "I will make you a deal, you sign everything you own over to me and I won't kill you," he said. Geto's eyes widened. "And no, you can't ask that," he started only to gulp and nod silently when he saw Naruto's hand lighting up in light blue fire. Naruto gave him a sheet of paper and a pen and Geto quickly signed everything he owned to Naruto. Naruto grinned as he picked Geto up by the collar of his shirt. "Now that you don't own anything, you are not useful to anyone. And since you wanted to take my love away from me, you will face her wrath," he said, grinning as he threw Geto over to Kurama. Before Geto could start running away, 4 chains sprouted out of the ground, binding his limbs to the floor and pinning him in place. Kurama smiled as she went over and kissed Naruto. "Thanks love, I'll take good care of him," she said happily as she walked over to Geto. Kurama ripped apart Geto's pants and underwear before her hand lit up in a red fire. She didn't want to use her demonic chakra to get the foxfire's blue flames, so she settled for red flames. She smirked at Naruto. "Look at that, Narukoi. He is so small. It's like a peanut," she said, laughing. Naruto laughed with her. Now, Kuro-chan, don't be too mean. It just means that you have less to burn," he said happily, not bothered in the slightest seeing Geto's small, borderline non-existent manhood. Geto had tears falling out of his eyes as he was humiliated and will have his manhood completely burned in a few seconds. Kurama sighed. Whatever she said as she turned her palm upside down, causing the fire to fall on his manhood, burning the small thing clean off, Geto screaming in pain all the while. Just before he could pass out, Kurama leaned next to his ear. Next time you threaten to rape a woman, make sure she is not the nine-tailed demon fox. Take this as a lesson. I am the strongest woman in the world, but let me tell you something, my husband is a lot stronger than I am. He is also a lot more sadistic, so be thankful that I only took your tiny little, he would have taken a lot more. Your lesson is that trying to rape women will end up bad for you. If you want to do that, make sure that you are the strongest man in the world, otherwise you are as good as dead. She said cheerfully before standing back up and leaning on Naruto's side, pushing his arm between her breasts and kissing him on the lips. Thank you for letting me do it. She said to him. Naruto nodded before he flicked her on the forehead. Sure. Though that man deserved much worse. If it was up to me, I would have taken more than what you did. Perhaps his eyes, his arms, legs. He was silenced by Kurama's lips pressing up against his own. There's no need to do any more than I did. Besides, we are leaving him here for the villagers to do whatever they want with him, she said, smiling gently at Naruto. Naruto shrugged. Whatever, I don't really care. I just want to get home. We weren't able to have sex in a bed for almost 2 weeks now, it's frustrating, he said, making Kakashi raised an eyebrow as Haku and Sakura blushed. You say it as if you have been having sex since you got to this country, he said questioningly. Naruto nodded. Yeah, of course. Every morning in the shower. I placed a silencing seal so you won't get off to it, he said, grinning as he wrapped his arms around Kurama and pressed her head into his chest. Haku dropped back with a nosebleed as he laid next to Zabuza, while Sakura simply scowled and blushed. Sai just stood there and looked at everyone as if he was a statue. Kakashi cried in tears as he looked at the two. You are so mean. He shouted before pulling his book out and shoving his nose into it. Zabuza suddenly sat up, Naruto's clone leaning back and dodging him. Zabuza groaned slightly as he felt pain from his stomach. What happened? He asked himself. Haku tapped him on the shoulder. Let me explain, Zabuza-sama, he said, and started to explain what happened to Zabuza, avoiding speaking about their deal with Naruto, as Naruto stated it to be an S-rank secret. Once he was done, Zabuza stood up slowly. He held his hand out. Naruto tossed him the scroll from the Hokage. You know who to give this to, right? Naruto asked, confirming. Zabuza nodded. Yeah, she'll get it, don't worry. He said before starting to walk away. Naruto appeared in front of him. You are not going anywhere until you are fully healed. If my mission is going to fail because you were attacked when you were incapable of defending yourself, I will kill you myself. Naruto said in a dangerous voice. Zabuza shivered and sat down. Fine, whatever, he said as Naruto's hand started to glow green. Only half an hour later, Naruto was done and Zabuza left along with Haku. Everyone returned to the house and continued with their usual routine. Naruto and Kurama trained their little pet physically, so she would have an easier time unlocking her inner demon fox. They both also sent clones to guard Tazuna at the bridge, just in case any of Gato's men were left behind. Kakashi continued to train his team at Tsunami, and Inari simply enjoyed the new life they now had as people living in a free country. However, now it was time to say goodbye. The Konoha shinobi stood on the leaving side of the bridge. In front of them was the whole population of Wave Country, saying goodbye and thanking their heroes. Naruto stood in front of Tazuna and his family, with the rest of the Konoha shinobi behind him, having already said their goodbyes. Naruto smiled at the 3 people in front of him. He went forward and hugged Tsunami shortly before releasing her and smiling. He shook hands with Tazuna before he crouched down and ruffled Inari's head. He stood back up and smiled as he handed one of his Hiraishin kunai to Tsunami. If you guys ever need me for anything, even if you need help in the kitchen, throw it on the ground and I'll be here in a flash. Also, keep it away from the drunk old man and the brat. He said, smiling happily. Tsunami giggled lightly at the way he described her father as she nodded. Thank you. You'd better be sure I'll be calling you sometimes for help in the kitchen. Also, bring Kurama-chan with you sometimes. It'll be great seeing you two from time to time. She said. Naruto nodded as he turned around and waved over his shoulder. The group of Konoha shinobi started to walk away from the country of Wave. As they walked, Naruto noticed that Sasuke was activating and deactivating his one-tomo Sharingan while smirking arrogantly. It was something which was happening in the past few days. Apparently, when Zabuza threatened his life, Sasuke was able to awaken his Sharingan. Has been getting off to using it for the past few days, and it was starting to annoy Naruto. Also, Sakura shouting about how her Sasuke-kun was so cool with his new Sharingan was very painful for everyone but the emotionless Sakura herself and Sasuke, who was too focused on getting aroused by his own insignificant power. Naruto finally snapped when he saw his poor little girl whimpering on his shoulder as she tried to cover her ears with her paws and grabbed hold of Kakashi and Kurama while his clones grabbed hold of Sakura, Sasuke and Sai before teleporting to the Hokage's office. The group appeared in the middle of the office, making Hiruzen raise his head from his paperwork. He smiled seeing the group and raised an eyebrow seeing Naruto petting a small fox on his shoulder and whispering soothing words to it. Hiruzen cleared his throat. "You guys want to explain what happened?" he asked. Naruto explained the short version of the story to the aged man, skipping the talk with Zabuza and only saying that he completed both of his missions. Before Naruto could explain further after their battle with Zabuza, but before his slaughter of Gato's small army, Sasuke, Sakura and Sai snapped out of the shock the sudden teleportation put them in. Sasuke pointed at Naruto. "You. Tell me what you did to get us here and after that, I demand you teach me how to do it. You should feel honored to teach a member of the Uchiha clan." He shouted arrogantly at Naruto. Naruto smiled very sweetly. "First of all, you have no authority over me. Second of all, I have no reason to teach you anything even if I wanted to. And third, it was a normal shunshin, you can ask your sensei to teach it to you. However, let me tell you that if you will continue with this attitude, you will not last long. I promise you that if you try to order me one more time before you outrank me, I will hurt you," he said coldly, his single blue eye glowing. Naruto turned his head and smiled at Hiruzen. Anyways, as I was saying, Naruto continued to explain to Hiruzen everything that happened in their mission. Once he was done, Hiruzen dismissed them all. Naruto grabbed Kurama and wrapped her in his arms, his head resting on her head and her back pressed into his chest. The two waved tauntingly at Sasuke as they disappeared in a swirl of leaves, reminding him of the so-called shunshin, which was used to get them to the Hokage's office. What if Naruto has Fox ancestor blood inside? Thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.